The manhwa meets us with a picture of the end of the world. For almost a year now, humanity has been defeated, most people have been killed, and the survivors have become vessels for monsters. The last hero from Survivor of the Resistance fought on, putting his best foot forward, but even the strongest man on the planet wasn't enough to defeat Tartaros, the demon king who is so arrogant that he decided to taunt the hero and heals him so they could have a chance to have a chat. But despite the difference in their powers, Tartaros recognizes the hero. He seems to notice something in him. Tartaros even remembers his name, Jafir. Tartaros says that Jafir, as the strongest man, should understand the demon king's attitude towards weaker beings, and suggests that he join the king's army, leave Earth and conquer other worlds, including the abode of the gods. Jafir pretends to agree to Tartaros's offer, but he thinks to himself that it is just an arrogant taunt, and the demon king wants to see the man humiliate himself before the one who took everything from him. Jafir extends his hand to the king, and they clutch at each other in a handshake. But the hero is up to something, and Tartaros realizes it too late. With an inspiring cry, Jafir casts an explosion spell that rips the demon's arm off and kills the hero, and he quietly passes away, resigned to defeat. But when he wakes up, he is surprised to find that all his wounds have healed, and his armor is intact. Looking around, he sees statues of gods, but he has never seen temples like this before. Jafir guesses that this is the afterlife, but a mysterious voice corrects him and tells him that this is the lower level of the pantheon of gods. A beautiful girl with wings descends to the hero. Jafiris, on the other hand, tries to summon his sword, but for some reason he fails. The girl says her name is Mercedes, and she is an elder angel who has come to convey the will of the gods. Out of the insistence of several gods, the three supreme gods decide to give Jafir a second chance and send him back in time, which means that the hero will be able to change the outcome of the battle. But there is one condition. He is sent to the past without his skills and stamina, but will retain his memories. And since he has already climbed to the top of the human pyramid once, with his knowledge it won't be hard for Jafir to do it again. The hero doesn't believe in the goodness of the gods, and asks what the catch is. Jafir thinks to himself that when demons killed people by the thousands, and people prayed with all their hearts, the gods turned their backs on them. They also took away the powers of the priests, who could fight demons by borrowing powers from the gods. He realizes that the gods do not care deeply about mankind, and the angel reveals the true will of the gods, who demand bread and spectacle. The angel tells him that the gods enjoyed watching Jafir fight demons for 5 years and go to the end, knowing that only death awaited him. They even helped him at the end of his journey. Mercedes asks if he remembers all these lucky coincidences, and before he could finish his next sentence, Jafir tried to kill an angel by releasing a powerful mana hit. The hero remembers how he and his beloved fought desperately because they wanted to live, and this was just entertainment for the gods. Mercedes summons a giant foot that seals the hero into the ground and tells Jafir to lay siege, for the gods are watching them. She also clarifies that when the gods said interesting, they only meant Jafir. Humans just don't have any meaning to them. Mercedes says that if he proves his worth, he will get everything he wants. He could ask for something for himself, or he could ask for something for all of humanity. Also, among the gods, there was one who asked to be returned for another reason. This was Tartaros, who is the god of destruction. He has never received such damage from a human until now, and because of his pride, he wants to replay everything. Jafir is perplexed that he wants to be given a chance for such a foolish and selfish reason. Angel asks the hero if he agrees, and Jafir replies that since the bastard wants to die, he'll honor his request. The sending back in time begins, but Jafir should have enough time to regain his strength. Also, the gods give him a gift to make the journey a little easier. The hero, however, thinks of taking revenge not only on Tartaros, but also on the rest of the gods, and he is sent back in time. Jafir comes to his senses in some cave surrounded by sweaty, half-naked men, who are glad they didn't nail him. The hero sees a brand on the shoulder of one of the men, and realizes that he has gone back 10 years to when he served as a slave in the temple. The half-naked man tells Jafir to stay out of anything else he's not asked to do, and Jafir shows that he's not afraid of the bastards. And it turns out that the former hero stood up for the little guy who was being beaten by the other slaves. Due to the fact that these events took place 10 years ago, Jafir doesn't remember the details at all, but he remembers about the gift of the gods, and goes to the dill place to check it out, and casts a spell to open a special advantage. And upon seeing the gifts of the gods, Jafir is pleasantly surprised. Some slaves notice how fast Jafir works and want him on their team. The hero, however, is still in shock at the gift of the gods. After opening a special advantage, all the information ended up in his head. He turned out to be a repository of the best skills, including even the ones he didn't have before. While Jafir was distracted, the shift supervisor noticed that he was slacking off and decided to teach the slave a lesson with a lash. But something went wrong, and the hero grabbed the whip with his bare hands, then calmly returned it to the boss. Thanks to past combat experience, he does not strain to see every movement of the enemy. But for some reason, the whip he caught didn't leave a scratch on him. And all thanks to the skill Iron Wall, which allows you to completely level the damage that is lower than your own defense, and guarantees high endurance. Jafir realizes that if you use his gifts wisely, you can benefit greatly. By the end of the day, he turns in all the coal he has mined, and all the crews are ranked. Jafir's brigade, thanks to him, ends up in first place. According to the rules of the mine, the money and products of the last place brigade are distributed among the first, second, and third places. Everyone begins to pray to the goddess Arya, but Jafir does not share their enthusiasm. Of the three great deities, Arya has the most followers and is the biggest creditor. Almost everyone who lives here has lost their homes to monsters, or like Jafir, were adventurers who were saved from death by the temple and driven into debt, forced to work off everything as a slave. And as long as the hero is branded a slave, he will not be able to move freely, because if he goes anywhere without permission, his heart will simply stop. The hero decides that he needs to get out of here as soon as possible. Jafir remembers his beloved Alteo and promises to protect her this time. In the evening at the bar, the mole whom the hero interceded for wants to treat his savior to a beer. But Jafir does not appreciate such a gesture, and after listening to the kid for a while, he realizes that the boy was beaten to knock their brigade out of the schedule to take the last place. So Jafir refuses the free beer. Instead, he approaches the bartender and asks for a recovery potion, for which he only has 1.5 gold pieces. So he decides to borrow the rest, but what little he has screams that paying off this debt will be unrealistic, because 1 gold already goes to pay the debt, and the wages from the mine are meager. But Jafir doesn't give a shit about that, and says he'll pay it all off. If you drink a lot of regenerating potions, you can get the hidden effect of increasing magical energy. If you drink even 10 potions, the effect is negligible. But the Hermes' secret skillet, which the hero inherited from the gods, increases the effectiveness of potions by 500%. Jafir realizes that he won't make much money in the mine, and starts preparing for his next step. He says that he has heard monsters in the mine, and will escort a group of hunters to the location. Jafir plans to make money in the dungeons. When one of the slaves finds a dungeon, hunters are sent there. Hunters are slaves with fighting skills who are specially selected to deal with monsters. Jafir doesn't understand why he, as an adventurer, was sent to the miners and not to the hunters. A little later in the store, he is told that he has exceeded the daily credit limit. The hero wonders what to do now, and the kindest nun suggests he take out a loan, leaving a pledge receipt for his organs. Jafir immediately agrees and buys potions of recovery with all the loan money, and even the nun says he's really fucked. I mean, a real man. The hero has drunk enough recovery potions and says he's ready now. He is met by hunters, whom he leads into the dungeon. Jafir meets the commander of the Gotham scout team and his subordinates Dale and Mark. He doesn't know the latter too, but he was familiar with Gotham before his rebirth. The last time Jafir was transferred to the hunters a month after this outing, in which he did not participate, and Dale and Mark were killed. Knowing this information, Jafir figured out how to utilize these poor souls. Upon arrival, the hunters and the hero are greeted by a cheerleader who ties threads to all members of the group, including Jafir. These threads are magical bracelets that will show if anything happens to any member of the group. And the group enters the dungeon. Moving deeper and deeper into the cave, the hunters come across kobolds, which they distract with a stone and attack from the back, leaving the slouching dogs no chance. Based on the data gathered by the recon team, a mop-up team is formed and slaughters all the monsters. This is standard mop-up procedure. Goth says that this dungeon has already been cleared by a cleanup team, and it looks like the unkilled monsters hid and waited out some time in another branch of the cave. Goth suggests that Dale and Mark not report to the cleanup team and deal with the weak monsters themselves. The boys don't appreciate the idea and say it's too dangerous. But Goth has a plan. He tells Jafir to get something, and the hero gets the fruit and leaves of the actinidia. If you mix them with the kobold shit, it will smell like a female in heat. The smell is strong, and kobolds can smell it 100 meters away. And so it goes. The kobolds fall into the trap, and Gotha can't let them fall. But it was actually Jafir who talked Goth into this adventure. In his previous life, when the hero was transferred to the hunters, he met Goth, who always wanted to distinguish himself, but he never got the chance. Taking advantage of his knowledge, Jafir took Goth aside and told him that he had already gone down there alone and knew that there were only a couple of kobolds. He also told Goth that before he was a slave, he was an adventurer, and his specialty was scouting. Goth hesitated at the suggestion, but when Jafir took advantage of Goth's desire to be more respectful and said that the decision was up to the commander, Goth immediately agreed. And realizing that with someone like Jafir on the team, he can clearly get recognition, Goth says he'll put in a good word for the miner and gives him the knife. Goth understands perfectly well why Jafir is doing him such a favor, but he doesn't care. He sees a good opportunity with his new acquaintance. After a while, the hunting party has already mopped up most of the kobolds. True, the quality of magic stones from such weak monsters leaves much to be desired. But the triumph of the scouting party does not last long. They stumble upon the remains of what they thought were wild animals, but it turns out to be the bones of kobolds. And whatever left those bones attacks Dale, grabs him with its huge paw, and hurls him into the wall. Marka yells for everyone to take cover behind him and activates a barrier that will hold back even a blow from an orc chieftain. But the creature attacking the group proves to be much stronger than the chieftain and punches through Marka's shield, sending him flying. Goth realizes that he is next in line. The monster attacks Goth with its powerful tail. The support group notices that 3 bracelets have been torn at once, announcing that something has happened to the members of the squad, and wonders what's going on. What's going on is the following. From the wounded, Goth is protected by Jafir, thanks to his skill Iron Wall. But even with this skill, the hero takes damage. After all, the creature that attacked them is a traitor. It pretends to be a baby of other monsters, and once it's strong enough, eats its parents. Jafir borrows a spear from Goth and says, in maximum pathos, that he's going to warm up a bit. He says he'll give the traitor one last wish, and asks him how he wants to die, activating ability number 3, which turns out to be a key that opens a magical vault from which items stacked there earlier can be retrieved at any time, anywhere. The hero pulls out a rag and dragonheart herb, which has a calming effect. He tells Goth to stay away, while tying his hand to his spear with the rag. Goth says that Jafir isn't even a fighter and let him die, but his pride won't let him hide behind the miner's back. But suddenly an animal fear grips his body. This is due to the traitor's skill, which paralyzes its victim with fear. Goth remembers his petty officer telling him about traitors. His victims are paralyzed with fear so badly that they can't even sleep a wink and can only watch and wait for their turn to come. But instead of his demise, a surprised Goth observes a very different picture. He sees Jafir fighting a traitor. The monster's skill has no effect on the hero, as he ate the herb to calm himself down. And thanks to Hermes' skill, which gives plus 500% to potion effects, it has even more effect. Jafir thinks to himself that among the 9 abilities from the gods, he only has 1 weapon. And that eats up a shitload of mana, so he can't use it right now. But this dog can be handled with a special gift. The potent poison of Fade's 72nd Poison King, #66 Viral. In a past life, Fade told the hero this recipe that he had been breeding his entire life. Fade parted with the recipe easily when he realized that the world had already come to an end. And if his poison would kill as many monsters as possible, he would be only too happy. Jafir manages to wound the traitor with a spear smeared with the strongest poison, which causes the creature wild pain. Now the hero only has to wait 3 minutes, and the poison will completely spread through the monster's body. When the traitor hits Jafir with his tail and throws him back into the wall, he realizes that it will be the longest 3 minutes of his life, so he pops a bubble of poison into the monster's open mouth and dodges the bite. Jafir continues his sassy attacks and almost gets hit by another tail strike, but he manages to intercept the attack in time and uses it to fly into the air, ending up behind the monster's head. He stabs the spear right into its eye, and the traitor breaks it in an attempt to get under Japhira. He grabs a shard of the spear, jamming it into the eye again, then pulls out a knife, which is immediately sent into the traitor's eye, causing the monster to start wriggling in agony, and Japhira almost falls off it, but is held up thanks to the knife. He jumps back on top of the monster's head, and all the training with magical energy was just for the sake of this moment. Using a technique to control magical energy, the hero unleashes a burst of mana and blows the barely alive goad to smithereens. Looking at this picture, he recalls his thoughts about Japhir, and realizes how he screwed up when he underestimated him. He realizes that Japhir would have achieved status and respect sooner or later without him, but since he's just an ordinary miner, he needed a ticket to the underground, which goad turned out to be. Japhir, with a killer look, says they need to have a chat. Meanwhile, elsewhere, we are shown a brutal scene. 2 strong men from the temple have attacked a minister suspected of devil worship. The poor man in tears begs to be believed, but this has no effect on the decision of the lads. Igromila, with one powerful blow of Morgenstern, punctures the head of the supposed heretic, from whose mouth after death comes out a centipede, which is blown up by the second monk. And now they are certain that they were not mistaken, whereupon the Inquisition brings the centipede and reports the incident. From the conversation with the head of the Inquisition, we learn that the church is preparing a very important raid in a month, and they must have time to get rid of all heretics before then. And we are once again transferred to our hero, who is already in the HR department with Goth. Goth is going to take him into his team of hunters, and the registrar informs him of all the risks, that if Japhir does something wrong, he will be held responsible for his actions as commander. But Goth happily agrees to all these terms. He realizes that with Japhir, he will take all his credit for himself. Yesterday in the dungeon, Japhir asked Goth not to report the traitor. Goth immediately asked if he was going to collect the corpses of the monsters, to which Japhir replied that he only wanted the corpse of the traitor, and Goth should report that it was just a lair of kobolds. If the hero lets Goth report it, he can promote him, but he won't make any more money from it. But here, if he secretly sells the materials from the monster's corpse, it will give him enough money to close all his credit. Goth reminds the hero that the support group is about to send people to them, and he won't be able to carry that corpse out unnoticed, to which Japhir grinningly puts his left hand on the monster and activates the third ability of the gods, completely absorbing the monster's body under the space. Goth says in shock that subspace should be clogged from 3 small objects, and Japhir was able to shove an entire traitor in there, and there wasn't even a trace of blood left. Japhir asks Goth if he wants a promotion. We return to present day, where the hero informs him that there are 3 more dungeons to go to. Goth can take all the rewards and laurels and divide them among the group members, and Japhir will take care of the corpses. Goth thinks that he and Japhir have a perfect symbiosis, and Japhir thinks that he will close all his debts if he sells the traitor. But he will not leave the temple for now, because he still has work to do here. In about a month, there will be a major raid by the Temple Knights. They will find an item that will shake the entire continent. Japhir wants to get his hands on this artifact by any means necessary to change the future. The hero has already been registered as a hunter, and he says that last time he didn't get to the big raid, because he became a hunter after it. But now he has a chance, and he will have to work hard. The hero has a brilliant plan, but the problem is that he doesn't know when to pull it off. Goth interrupts his musings and tells him to go to the supply room, and he'll go to the infirmary and report that Dale and Marka survived. While Goth was talking, the same thugs that killed the heretics at the beginning of the chapter passed by. Goth spotted them, and in a panic made Japhir bow to them. These men are slaves under the Heresy Inquisitor, but even considering they are slaves, they should be treated as important bigwigs, as under the pretext of searching for heresy, they can kill anyone without repercussions. The most badass of them all is Sahak. He went to the Inquisition just for the sake of killing people. Sahak, as if hearing Goth, calls out to the boys and heads over to them. Sahak turns his attention to Japhir. Goth tries to take full responsibility and says that he is Japhir's commander, and if there are any problems, it's his fault. But Sahak tells him to shut up and lets out a murderous aura. Goth immediately falls into a daze of fear, but Japhir stands confidently. Sahak says he's definitely convinced now. Japhir just stands still, but you can tell he's not a bad guy. It's hardly noticeable to others, but Sahak knows right away that he's not. Jafir, on the other hand, thinks Sahak was wrong to go bullish on him, and now he wants to mess with him. I remind you that you can read this and other manhwa at ramanga.org.sahak, and Jafir are standing like heroes of a western before a gunfight, and the silence is interrupted by Sahak's question. He asks if Jafir knows anything about the worshippers of the demon god. Our hero knows all about these bastards, traitors to humanity, worshippers of Tartaros who are the reason the humans are just about to be defeated, but they are now known as common heretics. Sahak says that they have differences from ordinary humans, and he is recognized for seeing these differences at a half glance. Saying that right now his gut is just screaming about how dangerous Jafir is, Sahak points his knife at him. He, as executive officer of the Inquisitor, will now conduct the interrogation, and anything Jafir says or does could be used far out of his favor. The hero nonchalantly asks if it's okay to inquire before the interrogation. Sahak's suck-up tries to yammer something out, but Sahak gives the floor to Jafir, who asks if they can change the location of their conversation. With a haughty smile, Jafir says that if any impropriety were to happen, the executive inquisitor might find himself in a very uncomfortable position. Sahaka is roused by Jafir's audacity, and he gets into a fighting stance, and a magical seal forms around the hero, the Redfield skill, the strength of which depends on the number of spells people cast, giving buffs to allies. Jafir says that this is quite interesting, and at maximum pathos, waves his arms, and gets into a fighting stance with a nonchalant face. Sahak says that he'd better watch his opponent first, but immediately jumps up with a yell that any dumbass would think so. He swoops down on Jafir, thinking he's invulnerable under the effects of the red field. Sahak unleashes a series of half-hearted attacks on his opponent, but Jafir fends off his attacks with his bare hands. Sahak then makes a sharp lunge, but the hero fends him off with ease, counter-attacking the fanatic, nearly punching him in the forehead. Sahak has to do a backflip, and in flight he successfully counterattacks Jafir, hitting him in the leg. He already thinks he's won this fight, but after thinking a little better, he realizes that it wasn't his leg he hit, but a piece of iron. Jafir's crushing fist delivers a series of lightning-fast blows to Sahak's face and body, after which he falls unconscious. Goth alerts the hero to a rat attack from the right, and a Morgenstern flies at Jafir, which he manages to block and flies back a few meters. The thug with the Morgenstern asks Jafir to play with him as well. The hero is surprised that the big guy named Flail can talk, and advises him to do it more often. Otherwise it seems like he's just a dog that Sahak raised. Goth strikes out in a rage with his spiked mace and shatters the stone floor. Random bystanders try to dodge the rocks flying in all directions. Goth begins to realize how powerful Jafir really is. He may have taken out the traitor in the dungeon, but here he took out Sahak in no time, and even now, as Flail slams his Morgenstern to the ground with all his might, Jafir fights off every stone in sight. Goth thinks that at this rate, Jafir can win, and Sahak will burn with shame when he wakes up, and he starts to report him to the Inquisition. Goth yells at Jafir to push on, because if he loses, Goth will be taken with him as an accomplice. But Blondie cuts in and says that Goth's friend is out of luck. He's been fighting off all the attacks, but he's been in trouble for a couple minutes now. Flail manages to grab Jafir's arms with his chains. As long as the red field works, these bastards are getting stronger by the second. A waking Sahak quietly wounds the hero in the back, and says he's going to make Jafir wish he'd asked to be thrown in jail from the start. Sahak gets ready, and makes an incredibly fast lunge with inhuman speed. He manages to wound Jafir, cutting his face slightly. The baffled fanatic says that he is now 80% reinforced, and no tricks will work on him. In a rage, he screams for Jafir to die in agony and gives him dozens of cuts. But suddenly something appears in front of his face. It turns out to be Jafir's fist, which seals him into the ground. Sahak is already falling unconscious, and Jafir grabs him by the hair and punches him from his knee right in the bastard's face, criticizing their teamwork along the way. Flail insults the hero, and reminds him that he fights him too, pulling him up with his chains. But Jafir is concerned about why a guy of his size is kicking dick on the sidelines, and is afraid to get close. The hero says that if in a past life his subordinates had performed this well in teamwork, he would have finished them off by now. He wraps the chains around his hands even more tightly, smashing the faces of everyone who cast the red field. Eyewitnesses to the event watch in silent shock to see what happens next. A humiliated Sahak asks who Jafir is, The hero replies that there should be more interesting questions in his interrogation, and in the end he was just curious about who he was. But even for that question, Sahak has no right to know the answer. Meanwhile, watching the whole scuffle was a red-haired guy who says that Jafir was sent by the same man. Jafir trashes Sahak. The amazed crowd can't believe what happened. Sahak, on the other hand, is in even greater shock and cocks his head about killing the hero. But Jafir doesn't care what the defeated zealot cackles. What he cares about is when this incident will reach the ears of some freak. Suddenly, the hero falls to his knees. Sharp pain has bound his whole body so that he can't move a finger. This is because of the mana freezing effect, which is applied at full mana depletion and causes wild pain. Jafir wonders if 10 years ago he was such a weakling. Suddenly, a strange creature materializes out of thin air. It appears to the family members of Mr. Usra, the great god of debt. He says that he's about to start collecting the debt for the Iron Wall skill. It's not just a skill that grants defense and stamina. Its main essence is that the damage and fatigue are accumulated and turned into debt. And the moment the user's mana reaches 0, all the damage and fatigue returns to the user at once, often killing the user. Usra, the god of debt, the double-edged blade that he lowers devours the despair of people mired in debt. Jafir thinks the asshole 100% watched his fight and chokes on his saliva. We are shown that this is the case. Usra is already excited about collecting debts. A measurement of accumulated damage takes place, at the end of which the countdown begins. Jafir finds it increasingly difficult to keep himself on his feet. He fails to hold on and falls to the ground. At the 4th second, he tears his bandages on his arm and pulls out a stash of restorative. Usra is already excited to collect, but at the last second, right before Gruzilla lets go, Jafir drinks the potion. Gruzilla flies into the ground at full speed, but at the very last moment, he discovers one point and stops, almost crushing Jafir. Sheila says she'll have to postpone the procedure until next time. The hero sneers at the god with a snide smirk and says that he's been surviving for a year after humanity's demise, and dodging the collection of the pathetic bash is like 2 fingers to piss on for him. Jafar culturally suggests the god to fuck off, to which Usra smashes a magic stone out of anger. After a while, Jafir regains consciousness, not realizing where he is. His confusion is interrupted by a lovely nun who asks how the hero slept. After waking up a bit, Jafir notices that he is tied to the bunk, and besides the nun, there are 2 half-naked men in the room and a bunch of tools for removing organs. The nun calms the hero down by saying that it's just her workroom, and reminds him that the deadline for repayment passed an hour ago, and asks the client if he's fucking around. The nun says she's heard about the hero's adventures. She takes a knife and expresses her concern that Jafar is not going to pay his debt, and almost sticks the knife in Jafar's eye, but stops to ask if he is going to pay. The hero realizes that he can't use magic now, as Usra's Bashka debt will catch up with him right away, and he says that he'll be paid next week for cleaning up the dungeon. The nun says in anger that they'll confiscate it anyway, and what will he do with the interest, since he'll only get— She calls out to the men and cuts the rope that was holding Jafir's arm. The men fix the hero's hand on the table, and the nun says she'll just cut off a couple of his fingers for now, so he'll take the church seriously. Jafir panics and tries to remember the nun's name, but she commands the men to cut, and one of the big guys swings over Jafir's fingers. The hero utters a name, which they decide not to show us yet. The nun immediately changes her gaze and tells the butchers to stop, perplexed, asking who Jafir is. The butchers ask the nun what's wrong, but she kicks them away. When the nun is left alone with the hero, she asks how he knows the name, to which Jafar replies that he can't help but know someone as popular as monster broker White Rose. Anna Primrose, a nun of the Temple of Light, is also the monster broker White Rose, that through her connections, brokers deals to sell stolen items, equipment, and monster corpses. Jafar says he was just on his way to see her, and asks her to untie his hands, as he's not really comfortable making a deal in this position, and then offers to talk to her in a normal setting. We are shown Sahak scattering food in the hospital. The doctors try to calm him down, but Jafir's words do not give him peace, and he goes into a rage, which is easily interrupted by a mysterious man who asks why the fuck he is making a mess in the hospital. It turns out to be the man who killed Sahak in the last installment. His name is Netson Bey. Sahak immediately gets on his ass, and Netson Bey says he'll sort it out here, ushering the staff out. He heard about the incident. Sahak tries to excuse himself and says that Nathan Bey shouldn't worry, and immediately the red-haired man puts his knife in his mouth, reminding him that Mr. Matisse said not to cause trouble that he'd be ashamed of later, but he still let himself get beaten up in front of a crowd of slaves. Sahak, in a panic, doesn't even know what to say in response, and Netsun Bey slashes his cheeks with a sharp swipe of his hand. He says that everyone was slaughtering Sahak found the first heretic. Netsun Bey thought he had a special talent, but since then, Sahak has only found 2 heretics in 6 months. The uppers are beginning to doubt him. Sahak falls to his knees and begs for just one chance. He is willing to do anything. Sahak says, first he has to finish off the guy who humiliated him in public, and then the Verkas will decide what to do with the loser. Sahak tosses Sahak a bundle and he unwraps it, surprised to find strange demonic objects. They were found in the room of the heretic that Sahak had figured out. Whether or not to use these items is up to the loser, but he's not in a situation where he has a choice, so he has to make a decision he won't regret. Sunbei walks away, leaving Sahak alone to make his decision. The loser thinks the choice is clear and decides to accept demonic gifts to straighten out Jafir. Sanbei, meanwhile, tells him to keep an eye on him so he doesn't do anything stupid. He also thinks Sahak has no talent, and he's getting dumber than an oak, and didn't even realize that Sanbei had locked him in there to create a smokescreen. Thanks to Sahak, the commander of the temple's night squad has let his guard down. Now they need to sneak into the raid and take all the artifacts for themselves, eliminating the knight's commander in the process, so that the third diocese will eventually fall into the hands of them, devil worshippers. Sunbei asks his comrade to find out about Jafir. He thinks about the hero's use of the devil worshippers' fighting style. Only the teacher and students know him, which means he was sent by the teacher. But then, why didn't Jafir contact him through the official communication channel? This is all very strange, and if it turns out in the end that Jafir is not from their cult, he needs to be eliminated. And we're back to Anna, in front of whom Jafir dumped the traitor's corpse. And White Rose doesn't hold back her emotions, saying how fucking awesome this thing is, but quickly regains her professional tone and says she'll formalize the merchandise. Jafir made his shopping list, which included potions, divine rosaries, and a bunch of different ingredients. Anna says that all of this pleasure will cost him 5,000 gold, and he needs to catch 3 more traitors. Jafir replies that he'll catch them in 3 weeks, and there's something else he wants to ask. But that remains off-screen. We are transported to a tavern where, in an informal setting, Goad suggests getting reacquainted to bond as a team. He reintroduces Mark and Dale, recounting their roles on the team, and the turn comes to introduce Jafir. But for some reason, all 3 sit in sepulchral silence, with no mood. God feels strongly about his squad befriending Jafir, as he will do a lot of good for their team, and the fateful silence is interrupted by Jafir. He says he doesn't drink Sanyo and puts a fancy bottle on the table. The boys instantly cheer up. They don't need to know that Jafir got the bottle from White Rose. The drinking begins, and while the boys are having fun, Jafir thinks about the fact that he knows Goth from a past life, and it would be easy to work with him. However, Mark and Dale were supposed to be dead, and he knows nothing about them. So he can't choose whether he should train them or just get rid of them. Dale meanwhile glares at Jafir. He's thinking about the fact that the newcomer is clearly not clean. Before the drink, Goad explained the situation to the guys and asked them not to fuck up in front of the new guy. Dale said that as commander, Goth had the right to take on whoever he wanted, but he didn't think to ask for the team's opinion. He thinks that Jafir was just lucky, and that he somehow cheated, since he couldn't have defeated the betrayer on his own. Goth laughingly asks who killed him then, because if it wasn't Jafir, then Goth did it. But Dale is more interested in the deal to sell the betrayer, worried that if they are caught, they will go to the guillotine as accomplices. Marka interrupts Dale and says that everything is already decided, especially the rewards for the sweep will be shared between them, so the best way to start is to just watch Jafir work. At the drinking party, Dale remembers those words and can barely contain his irritation. One calls himself a commander and makes the decision alone, and the other fell for the booze. He won't recognize Jafir for anything. He's annoyed that a leftist type has come to their team and is setting his own rules. Dale thinks that if Jafir is a common crook, they will find out soon, and by that time, he will be on his guard. The next day, the team sets out on another sweep. They come to the cave village of Edrin. This village was founded in a cliff, and it has remained untouched for several hundred years. The boys are amazed at such beauty, and Gott tells them that it was even cooler inside. There's even a hotel where those lucky enough to go on a mission stay. But now the place has become a breeding ground for monsters. Jafir infiltrates the dungeon using the magic control and mana perception skill. The hero wraps his body in magic and covers a small area on the floor around him. This helps him increase his perception and detect objects and traps imbued with mana in his path. Jafir confidently guides the team behind him through the web. It isn't long before the hero explains his plan to the team. He immediately realized from the footsteps outside the dungeon that a dark steel spider lurked within. According to Jafir's plan, they will infiltrate the dungeon, being careful not to get caught in the web. Stealthily, they will sneak to the cave where the baby spiders are. After that, they will dispense a paralyzing potion. They wait a little while, and then they just quietly slaughter them all. Jafar says it won't be easy, because he'll have to use perception all the time. And Dale interrupts the hero, saying that the problem isn't whether it's going to be hard or easy. If there really is a dark steel spider inside, the four of them can't handle this dungeon. The dark steel spider is a monster with iron-like skin. It has a powerful striking power, and a defense that can't be penetrated by any knife. In terms of danger level, the traitor is a baby compared to him. What kind of company can't clean up this dungeon? And they'd better call in reinforcements. Jafir says that's not a bad idea. If he's not sure, it's best not to go. The hero can clear the lair alone. Dale is shocked by Jafir's words, but they only convince him more strongly that the newcomer is a common charlatan. Neither the fight with the traitor nor the fight with Sahak Dale personally saw, and now Jafir claims that he will single-handedly sweep the lair of the dark steel spider. If that were true, why the fuck would he need vegetables like Dale? This leads him to believe that the dungeon isn't a strong threat if this rogue is going in there with such confidence. Dale wonders how much longer the clown will last before Jafir. While this degenerate is strutting around, he's caught a web that he can't get off his hand. No matter how hard he tries, the web won't come off, and Dale encounters spiders, who instantly pounce on the gasping man. But Jafar notices it in time and reaches out his mighty hand, throwing Dale by the scruff of his neck away from the spiders, which burrow into the hero's arm. But after a moment, the spiders realize they can't bite through Jafar. The hero, with a smirk, asks why the spider is so surprised, and with one powerful blow, smashes the poor spider into dust, the fragments of which fall to the legs of Dale, who is pantsed. Jafar yells for everyone to gather, and the team gets on the defensive. A little earlier, Jafar had foreseen that things might not go according to plan, so he told the guys to wrap their weapons in cloth, because steel spider webs can't be cut with a blade, so they should just fight off the webs with their weapons. It may not be possible to remove the web during the fight, but these things are weak and light enough so the guys will have no trouble swinging their weapons. Goth wonders just how many of these things there are. Dale swings his sword in pure panic, and one of the spiders rushes at him like a bullet and wounds Dale in the shoulder. But the guys have already rounded up all the spiders, and Jafir kills all the creatures at once with one powerful blow. Finally, the team can relax for a while, but here Dale's wound turns out to be very deep. He finally realizes he was wrong, and it upsets him even more. Jafar holds out a bottle to him. It's a restorative mixed with healing herbs, a sort of healing potion. Dale finally realizes that Jafir is really strong, and surely he must have foreseen that Dale would be the one to screw up. Realizing this, albeit reluctantly, he admits that he's been let down and expects Jafar to tell him off, humiliating him even more. But Jafir says that everyone can make a mistake, and next time he won't be. In life, the hero often trained unimportant fighters, and often there were cases when no matter how hard you try, but to put something in the head of a jerk will not work. But Dale is a different case. He has already realized his mistake, and it is possible to put some hopes on him. Besides, with a character like his, words won't help, and it's better to let him learn from his mistakes. After clearing this dungeon, he will make the right conclusions. A little later, the boys encounter some larger arachnids. Mark gets impaled by a giant spider. Gott reports that the paralyzing potion worked, and Dale attacks the spider's belly. The weakness is revealed, of course, by our hero. Dale thinks that everything Jafir says turns out to be true, and wonders how he knows so much. With these thoughts, he cuts into the spider's belly, killing the poor guy. The boys rejoice in their victory, but Dale has already caught a star, and says he's as good as pissed as a pail. Jafir, who watched the whole thing, says it wasn't bad for the first time. The hero sits on a huge pile of corpses. While the guys were tambourine dancing around one spider, Jeffer has interrupted all the others. He orders Goth to get some provisions, to have a snack. During the snack, the guys wonder who Jafir was before he became a slave. The hero replies that he was an adventurer, but Marco was referring to whether he was an apprentice of some major guild. Jafir remembers his teacher, but decides not to say anything. He says there's a room left with the boss. The guys ask what the plan is, and Jafir silently starts cutting off parts of the spider, specifically its claws, which the hero is going to use as weapons. Jafir says the guys have had enough, and they should get out of here. It's been 4 years since Goth became a hunter. Many of his comrades have died in those 4 years, and he has survived for only one reason. If there was a dangerous path somewhere, he would take a different path. Sure, he couldn't get promoted because of it, but there was no man to protect him before. He realizes that Jafir from the beginning planned to kill the boss alone, because with his skills, guys will only get in the way under his feet. Goth agrees, but Marco says that since they came here together, they should go to the end together. Goth panics and thinks Marco is talking nonsense, but Dale joins Mark and wants to go to the end too. Goth, on the other hand, thinks they'd rather die than deal with such a monster. He looks at Jafir, hoping the new guy will send the guys away, and the hero says the guys misunderstood him. He said to go out, not to beat a buck, and now he's going to assign duties. Goth cries with relief. A little while later, Jafir moves deeper and deeper into the cave. After a while, he stumbles upon a clutch of queen spiders, guarded by spider knights. Also, Jafir sees the spider queen. He takes a step closer and comes to a safe distance. In order for the queen to lay her eggs in peace, the spider knights kill anyone who gets close enough to their lair. Jafir uses a silver key and pulls out a bunch of flour sacks, then scatters them all over the lair, creating a veil of flour dust. "Hello, goblin killer." Jafir pulls out his crossbow and takes aim, firing a bolt with a metal tip and hits a rock, creating sparks that react with the flour dust and cause a massive explosion. Jafir, like a true tough guy, doesn't look at the explosion and says that you can't kill such powerful creatures with that. The burning, enraged spiders run after the hero and catch the bolts with their faces. Jeffer has pre-lubricated them with Viral's number 68 poison. One of the spiders makes a sharp dash across the corpse of its fellow spider and almost catches up with the hero, who hides around the corner. The spider dashes after him, but instead of Jafir, he stumbles back into a dense web. A little earlier, the hero explained to the boys that if you squeeze the spider's gland, you can get their web, and ordered the boys to set up spider web traps in certain places. And since Jafir had burned a special enzyme on the spider's legs, they were now sticky to their web too. If Jafir fought the spiders inside, their webs would interfere too much with his fighting. That's why they had to be lured outside. Jeffer pulls out a spider pincer from the silver key and in one crisp motion punches through the skull of the arachnid that was entangled in the web. There's still one spider knight left, which the hero wants to lure out like the others. But it turns out to be the queen, who gathers a huge amount of poison in the semblance of a mouth and vomits it in the direction of Jafir. He recalls lectures from Fade, who told him that the most dangerous thing about this poison is the curse that blocks regeneration and defense abilities, and a person with low defenses would simply be melted by this poison, so one should avoid it by all means. Jafir pushes himself off the ground and jumps out of the cave, and the giant creature flies out after him. Jafir runs towards the guys and yells for them to take up positions, then makes a sudden dash and soars into the air, delivering a series of lightning-fast blows to the monster's back, which lets out a piercingly loud and groaning cry in pain, and starts attacking everything it sees. But Jafir cosplays Bruce Lee and, at maximum pathos, draws the queen's attention to himself. And the burning creature with a mouthful of drool is distracted by the hero. Since Jafir is the only one who can fight the queen head-on, he will act as a tank, and while he distracts her, the rest of the trio will finish off the monster. Gode thinks about how he never risked his life by choosing only the safe path, and the guys always followed him on the safest path. Standing in front of the giant creature, he wonders if they can overpower it. The lads remember how the more successful hunters bullied them, because such a cowardly crew is no use to them. So at least let them cook food and serve at the service of normal hunters. Dale yells about how much more of this crap they can take. He says they've come a long way, and there's no need to piss around. It's time to fight. Yer cordons off Dale's speech, and he thinks about how they never would have thought to fight such a monster. But with the arrival of Jafir, everything changed. Mark says that everything worked out perfectly before, as long as they obeyed Jafar, and offers to trust him again. Gode realizes that his team is completely disobeying him, and it makes him incredibly ashamed, and he can't just stand by. Gode attacks the monster the moment the outer layer of the shell cracks from the fire, because on the inside, this thing isn't so invulnerable. Marka stabs his dagger into the spider's claw and bludgeons it with his powerful hammer. Before the fight, Jafar explained to them where the nerve bundle running down the center of the paws is, and told them to cut it with a blade lubricated with paralyzing poison. Dale is incredibly happy that he is able to wound such a giant, but the huge paw of the spider attacks him sharply from behind, and noticing it, he realizes that he will not be able to dodge. But at that moment, Jafir with all his power hits the monster's skull. It knocks down the spider's attack on Dale, and the hero reminds who is the daddy, telling the queen that she has the right to attack only him, and they begin exchanging blows at inhuman speeds. Dale freaks out at Jafar's skills, while he can't even keep track of the attacks. The reckless rookie fends off all the monster's blows. He remembers saying they didn't have the strength to finish the queen, but Jafir disagreed. He said that when he destroyed the queen's eggs, she would be so enraged that she wouldn't pay attention to anything around her except the killer of her children. And even more important, this is one thing about the queen. Dale thinks about the fact that everything is going according to Jafir's plan, and it's been 5 minutes since the fight started, and the queen still hasn't moved from where she fell. Due to the fact that she procreates while in a narrow egg-laying chamber, she has a habit of barely moving her hind legs, so the area around her hind legs is relatively safe. With the exception of a web or stampede attack, the most effective strikes will be against whichever opponent is in front of her face. Jafar is distracting her now, and if you disarm her hind paws with a paralyzing potion, her death is a matter of time. Markovo is galvanized into shouting that they can do it, and even Gott believed in his own strength and bravely attacked the Spider-Woman. But his spear got stuck, and the queen began to raise her paw along with the good Gott. To overpower Jafir, the queen uses her extra paws and Gott flies off to the side. The Spider Queen is enraged by the death of her children, and Jafar takes advantage of the fact that she has lost her cool, and punches through the neck area, grabbing the poisonous gland, twisting and ripping it outward. The hero removes his belt and bandages the gland. Now for a few minutes the queen will not be able to let the poison gland in. Jafar performs a somersault, and using the power of rotational inertia, delivers a mighty blow to the monster's head. This battle will be won by the one who stays focused, and the hero of the team has it clearly higher, so he manages to take down the giant. Marka and Gott are happy that they made it, but Dale realizes that they essentially did nothing, and the monster was killed by Jafir. Dale realizes that the hunt and its success depends directly on who is in command of the operation. Realizing the importance of Jafir, Dale wants to become his follower. The hero says that he will not be able to take the queen without a trace, as it was with the traitor, but the smaller spiders will be able to steal completely and give them to the White Rose, and from the queen he will take only the essentials. And before he can finish, someone responds to Jafir by calling him Hunin. If you translate it from Korean, it literally means director of the firm. Now in slang it has a slightly different meaning. You can compare it, say, with the Japanese senpai. Jafir is called Hunin by Dale. He says that Hunin has done a good job, and now he needs to rest, and he should leave all the chores to Dale. He starts sucking up to Jafir in every possible way, and makes the boys help him. The hero thinks that these three are not so bad, but this is the end of their powers. Their powers aren't enough to help him deal with the bastard Sunbae. Skill level, equipment, and team members. None of those are enough right now. He needs some kind of countermeasure right away. We are transported back to the temple, where a nun is selling what Jafar has gotten. She manages to set up an illegal trade right in the middle of the day, and makes it look like a fundraiser for the temple. Jafir thinks about where this world is going. Though in the current times, there isn't a single person who believes that the temple has only holy men serving. The temple collects money from the faithful by the mountains, and the city next to the temple was erected just for the sake of having knights and battle slaves protect the townspeople from monsters. There's a price to pay for security, too. At least now it can be bought with money, but soon everything will change, and security will have to be bought with blood. A little later, White Rose says that Jafir brought some excellent carcasses, and they managed to sell them for a high price. She starts to set his teeth on edge, showering him with compliments, but Jafir asks how the money is. The nun immediately gets serious and informs him that he has collected 48% of the amount needed, but the payment of the church debt is also deducted from it. She also signs him up to clean the lab and gives him a costume and an entry card. On the hero's shopping list was an alchemist's kit, but White Rose can't just steal it, so from 7 o'clock the lab will be at Jafir's full disposal. The hero is very happy about this, because this option is much safer than stealing. And while the nun started talking teeth to Jafir again, someone called out to her. It was Nedson B. Jafir thinks he's very unlucky to run into him now, since he's the only one among the Inquisitor's 12 confidants who is considered a fighter of the first class. White Rose puts on her sainthood mask again, and says she's a little busy right now. And to herself, she thinks to herself that Sunbay has spoken to her, but his target is Jeffer. She knew they'd want to get even for Sahak sooner or later, but she didn't think the insolent bastard would decide to have a showdown in front of a temple servant. She offers to chat later, and then she'll offer him goods at low interest, since the temple trusts him. Sunbay asks for an answer to an important question, and invites the nun over for a cup of tea, and is even willing to treat Jafir. Sunbay asks if Jeffer knows Sahak, to which he replies that he's getting old, and his memory is failing, so he doesn't keep junk in his head. They glare at each other, and start emitting powerful auras that seem to sink into the nun's skin. She realizes that Jafir would definitely not pass for a battle slave. In terms of skills, he's on the level of a temple knight, or even higher. Sunbay understands why Sahak didn't get past Jafir, and he wasn't planning on fighting today. But since the conversation went that way, it's okay to have some fun. But the nun yells for both of them to fall to their knees, and because of the slave's clemma that forces them to do whatever the servant's orders, they both kneel down. White Rose slaps Jafir, reprimands him for making a fuss and takes him away, and tells Ned that Jafir is her toy, and if he so much as lays a finger on him, she'll beat the crap out of Ned. After leading the hero away, the nun asks if it's impossible not to fall for such stupid provocations, and says that Sunbay is very dangerous. Even her hands are still shaking with fear. The nun starts reprimanding Jafir again, saying that because of such worries and adventures of the hero, she will die, and asks him to be more careful, because he brings her money. White Rose changes her face and puts her hand on Jafir's cheek, which she herself has struck. The nun says they have a frame in them, she can't protect him, so let him act more carefully. Jeffer pushes her hand away and says it was just a warm greeting, and if Ned really wanted to do something, she wouldn't have time to intervene. The hero thinks that since Ned has shown himself, it means that they have almost everything ready, and he should hurry up too, so he hurriedly leaves for the lab, but before that he has one request. The nun is clearly unhappy with his private requests, and we return to Ned, who is experiencing the power of the slave's terminal for the first time. He recalls his teacher asking him to sneak into the temple disguised as a slave, and place the infamous Clemo on himself. Sanbei tried to refuse, as he harbors a great hatred for the servants of God, but the teacher says that the 2 devil followers they sent to the temple disguised as priests have been repressed, and now they've stepped up the vetting of priests, so this method is no longer appropriate. But the temple is absolutely not watching the slaves. They think that the slave terminal is enough to control a person, so the teacher asks Ned to put the slave terminal on himself, infiltrate the temple and steal artifacts from the raid, because only he will be able to perform this task, and the priests of the Temple of Light will never guess that they found out the way to remove the slave terminal. However, Ned can't use it now. He will have to wait for the right moment. And we are transported to a village that is too poor to pay for the temple's defense against monsters, so they have to constantly rebuild a fence around the village that is forever being destroyed by monsters. The people find out that someone from the temple has come to visit them. The uninvited guest turns out to be Sahak. He asks the villager how many people are here, and the villager replies that there are about 50. Sahak says that's enough, and pulls out a demonic whistle, which he uses to summon a hideous-looking monster. Its glandular, slimy tentacles fly towards the civilians and tear them to shreds, while the distraught Sahak smiles and bathes in the villager's blood. He revels with his newfound strength, and thinks about the fact that he will never forgive Jafir for the shame he has suffered, bursting into hysterical, insane laughter at the sight of the peasants dying in agony. And on that bloody note, we are transported to the alchemical laboratory of the Temple of Light, where Jafir has gathered enough ingredients to prepare poison hash 61 Zagan. It was already evening when the hero found himself in the White Rose's room, which was the request he asked for before leaving for the lab. If Ned Samba's henchmen found him tonight, things were going to get fucked up around here, and he wanted to avoid that for as long as possible. And while Jafir was mastering something, the nun was scrutinizing a strange sheet that indicated acupuncture points. Jafir prepared a strong as steel harness wood and accumulated some mana in his hand. Then, with one powerful blow, he broke the bar into small chips that he would use as needles. He dips them for 10 minutes in Belial and Zagan poisons, diluted 1 to 100, to give them a good soaking. Everyone thinks poison is only made for weakening and killing, but after the apocalypse, people learn to use it in other ways. Jafir stabs one needle into his shoulder, then lightning pierces a dozen needles all over his arm and curls up in pain. White Rose tries to help, but Jafir stops her. He warned her shortly before that he was about to do something reckless, and when he gives the signal, she's going to have to do something. With the help of the poison, he's going to get stronger. The 72 potent fade poisons can change their properties depending on their concentration. If calculated correctly, the poison will turn into a cure, and one that will push the skills above the limit. But the problem is the combination of the two. Belial causes sharp pain, while Zagan causes drastic changes in the body. The infernal pain causes resistance to drop, but the hero doesn't have enough ingredients or skills to make a more stable potion, so he has no other choice. So Jafir uses the small celestial circle. By controlling the flow of mana, he can repair internal damage, and also by chasing magical energy through the magic circle, he provides resistance to poison. If everything works out, we find ourselves in the Cathedral of the Temple of Light. In the last part, Jafir had single-handedly mopped up a nest of black basilisks and finished off the 30-meter-tall creature guarding the brood. The two men were discussing this while coming down the stairs. They say that the slave has been doing well lately, and apparently wants to join the raid team. Senior Heresy Inquisitor Matisse says it's worth questioning him and finding out if he's a devil worshipper. But Lucius, commander of the Knights of the Temple of Light's 3rd District, decides to leave the suspicious slave alone. Matisse objects that if they don't find all the devil worshippers in their ranks before the raid begins, Lucius doesn't let him finish thinking about his concerns, and says it would be best if this guy turns out to be one of them. He wants someone in the raid who can be taken advantage of. The devil worshippers will never reach the main creature on their own, as they are just thieving miscreants, so it would be better to use them, and then kill them all along with the dungeon boss. Matisse warns that he, as commander of the guard force, and as Lucius's longtime friend, is against this dangerous plan. The Heresy Inquisitor's grumbling amuses Lucius greatly, and he says he knew about Matisse's reaction to his plan, so he will only show it to him since they are old friends. Lucius swings open the huge doors, and Matisse goes into shock at what he sees. He had read about these things in books, but never thought he would see them in person. These are the legendary artifacts, the Spear of Light, and Mikhail's winged shield, on which Lucius spent a third of his fortune. With their help, they will finally take down this dungeon, which they have been storming for 11 years, so Matisse need not worry, because Lucius will be invincible in this raid. And we're transported to the battle slave barracks, where the trinity of Jafir's worshippers are returning from training. Dale asks why there's so much pandemonium on the training field, and Mark replies that the raid is coming, and there are only 2 or 3 spots left, so everyone wants to show what they can do. But that doesn't concern our poor souls anyway. God notices a nun coming out of their room. The boys immediately bow their heads and greet the kindest nun, who reminds them to make sure the scum don't forget to pay interest. And after she has passed, Dale is perplexed as to what she was doing in their room, and the boys are greeted by Jafir, who is fixing his new ring. The guys are naturally baffled by Jafir's new acquisition, and ask where he got such hubbub. The hero remains cryptic, and doesn't answer the guys directly, that White Rose gave him the Purity Ring, which increases the wearer's magic resistance and mana circulation, as well as once a day the user can use a curse release. Rosa said that she would need to find a good outfit after the enhancement, and decided to give him the ring, since it wasn't too hard for her to get one. Jafir is very happy that even without an assignment, she took the initiative and thinks how clever she is. Rose, while walking away from the client, thinks about what she learned from informants in the black market about the Persephone Assassins Guild, legendary mercenaries that enhance their skills with poisons and are trained in deadly martial arts. They know how to kill, and they do it damn well. Suspicious professionalism in hunting, skill enhancement with poison. Now it all adds up. The client was Persephone's assassin, which means the moneybags are willing to pay a fortune for his skills, and now is not the time to make a penny trading monster corpses. Now that she's got the chance, she's got to take on a client like this. And she'll start by finding the best equipment for her client. Jafir realizes that she misunderstood the reason why he's so trained, but as long as she gives him the gear for free, he's even better off. If White Rose spreads such rumors from Jafiri, faith will definitely come to the hero. Yer interrupts Jafiri's musings and asks him since when he's been in such a relationship with the nun. The boys, on the other hand, say that they respect their Hyonim as a man. By the way, I was corrected under last week's vid that Hyonimim is comparable to the prefix sama rather than sampai, though both are kind of like a younger man's address to an older man. Well, you should probably know better. Jafir tries to change the subject, but they're already distracted by the sound of a knife sticking in. The boys stare intently at the door, and Dale decides to see who dares to disturb their Kyonim. When he goes out the door, he sees no one, but he finds a leaflet in the door, nailed with a knife, which contains an urgent order for Goth's group to go to the specified place and scout the situation. The boys gather around the order and discuss the authenticity of the document. Although it was handed over in a strange way, it has the seal and signature of the chief of the hunters, which means that it is official. Jafir snatches the order and scrutinizes it closely. He discovers that the signature is that of the chief of the hunters, but here the handwriting is Ned's, which means that Ned has sent him an invitation, and Jafir will go there alone. Again, speaking of which, I was corrected about Ned in the comments as well. Sambi is not part of his name, but a respectful address to an elder. I'll keep you posted. Let about time the hero rushes to the designated location. As Jafir runs, he reflects on the fact that the raid is only 20 days away. The dungeon they will go to is called the Tomb of the Loathsome Princess, one of the 8 problems of the world. Because of the difficulty, it's been impossible to get through to the main beast for 11 years. That's why the selection criteria for the raid is so high. To get there, the hunting group must rank at least 5th in the rankings of the outgoing year. Or you can get a letter of recommendation from a slave who is under the direct command of a priest participating in the raid. So Jafir is using Ned in this life, because he is a slave in direct subordination to Inquisitor Horesius. If Jafir tricks Ned and gets a letter of recommendation, he will 100% get into the raid. Ned, who is entrusted with a very difficult mission, simply cannot ignore the fact that the hero has a style of martial arts of cultists, and he is definitely itching to test Jaffer. Meanwhile, the hero lands like a comet instead of the one indicated on the map. His silhouette is barely visible behind the dust cubes, and as soon as everything dissipates, Jafir smugly awaits Ned's next move. A mysterious figure praises the hero's epic appearance. Jafir recognizes that voice. It is Sahak, asking him if he came alone. The hero says with a disgruntled face that he has no time to play with Sahak, and all these 10 days he has been tormented by that humiliating defeat. He bares his blade, preparing to show Jafir his new power, but the hero is instantly in front of his opponent, knocking him out with a slight movement of his hand and making his characterization about Sahak. Jafir thinks about the fact that Ned is scrupulous, and it's unlikely he's testing him with Sahak alone. It's more likely he sent someone else. Jafir shouts for anyone preparing to attack to come out and fight him, and mad laughter can be heard from the dust created from the recent skirmish. Behind Jafir stands a waking Sahak, who has already summoned the ugly creature with the tool of the devil's followers. Like a true Sundara, Sahak is displeased that Jafir isn't paying attention to him. The summoned demonic monster envelops the madman's body, lifting him off the ground, and Sahak screams that he will finish Jafir off and tear him to pieces. Ordering the creature to attack the hero, its tentacles fly at Jafir. He doesn't realize what the thing is doing here, and it unleashes a powerful shock attack on the hero. Sahak rejoices at this like a child, and wishes Jafir would die soon. But soon he notices that his summoned creature is being torn to pieces by a powerful wave of energy. Sahak doesn't realize what's happening, seeing Jafir through the hole he made in the monster. What Sahak is using is a living tool of Shoggoth's devil followers. The hero did not expect to see this scum here. Shoggoth sleeps in an egg-like form, and when he hears the hypnotizing sound of a special instrument, he wakes up. The ocarina hypnotizing instrument is a musical instrument that, by playing various combinations of notes, can be used to control Shoggoth. The instrument also protects the wielder from soul pollution. Jafir walks calmly towards Shoggoth and thinks about the fact that the monster has no mind. It has only hunger, for the monster grows stronger by absorbing the mana of the people it eats. The artificially created scum digs into almost every part of Jafir's body, and it inflicts the soul pollution skill on him. It is superimposed from just one touch with Shoggoth, and you begin to feel fear and see hallucinations. At 100% soul pollution, a state of desensitization sets in, where one loses their mind and attacks their own allies. This is an artificial monster that was created by the devil's followers for indiscriminate killing. Jafir is slowly but surely approaching Sahak, but he is not afraid of the hero, for his red eyes indicate that he is close to 100% soul pollution. But by the look in Jafir's eyes, it is clear that everything is not as the mad fanatic thinks, and the hero is enveloped by divine light, creating a faint appearance of angel wings around him, because he used the purity ring that once a day removes any curse. A shock of shock flies from Jafiris, whereupon he grabs Sahak by the throat and says that he used to care only about his own skin and the lives of his men. At some point, however, other thoughts began to cross his mind. How things would have turned out if he had more comrades who knew how to fight. And if he had rallied better with the other survivors, maybe then the people he cared about could have lived a little longer. Sahak doesn't understand what Jafir is even saying, but because of the hand on his throat, he can't say a word. And the hero says that in this life he has decided to save everyone he can. So Jafir is infuriated that Sahak fed about 100 people to Shoggoth. He asks how many more people have to die for the entertainment of that fucking trash. And with the words that he has no right to live, the hero prepares an attack, accumulating mana around his fist and converting it into electricity. His fist flies like lightning and pierces Sahak's chest, causing him to spit out at least half a liter of blood. But that's not enough for Jafir, and he smashes the bastard's face with an equally powerful punch, preparing a battle-style pose of the royal tiara flow, a thunder palm technique that strikes a palm accelerated with magic at the bloody mist that scattered the enemy from the previous strikes, and then creates lightning. And Jafir strikes the brat with a powerful discharge of electricity, after which Sahak dies. Jafir says he probably died instantly, but he was in incredible pain. He was shocked all over his body. This death is just the right amount of nastiness. The hero then raises the spear and performs the Shoggoth death chord, which breaks the magical bond that connects the monster's cells, and the creature dies. Someone calls out to Jafir. He is surprised that the hero knows this song, because it is the secret song of the cult. The one who called out to Jafir turns out to be Ned, who says that the hero knows a lot of things. Jafir realizes that he must make Ned believe that he is a follower of the devil, because only this way he will change the future. Also, Jafir catches up with memories from the past, in which he failed to repay a soul debt to his teacher. This time the hero wants him to meet the other end, and to do so, he needs to get close to Ned and deceive him by all means. Ned says that he has been watching the hero all this time and has come to one conclusion. He bares his blade and says that Jafir must be destroyed. He makes a dash at superhuman speed, finding himself in front of Jafir, who is ready for a fight. Ned lunges and unleashes a series of super-fast blade attacks on the hero, and once behind his opponent, he realizes that judging by the feeling in his hand, none of the attacks reached their target. Ned is hit by 3 stones of charged electrical energy, which he not without difficulty repels, and notes that Jafir is good, because there are only a couple of people on the continent that can match him in speed. The hero taunts Ned and says that it is not proper to attack an unarmed man with a blade, suggesting that he would be inferior to Jafir in hand-to-hand combat. Ned takes the provocation and throws out his blade, and as he gets into a fighting stance, Jafir is ready for a fight, and they both begin to circle around the circle, keeping their eyes on each other as if dancing. And Ned makes his first attack, applying the same principle as the thunder palm. He surrounds his body with electricity using explosive acceleration. The lightning around him gives him a huge boost in strength and speed. There is almost no defense against this technique, but students of the same technique know how to defend against it. Jafir uses the floating clouds technique. There are yin and yang electric currents. Opposing currents attract, but identical charges of electricity repel each other. This is the essence of the defense technique. Jafir adjusts his strikes to match the attacks of the yang flow, defends the strike sites, and deflects all of Ned's attacks. During the pause between attacks, Ned thinks that this is easier said than done in such a short period of time, because he strikes at speeds beyond human capabilities. If you don't wrap your body in enough energy, Ned will throw an attack, and it will go straight at the target. And when the defender's energy is greater than or nearly equal to the attacker's, the blow will miss. This technique can only be used if you have honed it to the point where you reflexively adjust the amount of energy instead of hitting. This technique cannot be copied by any trick. This is a good reason to believe that Jafir is actually a cult member. However, it is also the same thing that makes Ned doubt even more, because the technique of the royal tiara was inherited only by him and the eldest apprentice. So Ned dares to ask who Jafir is. Ninth in the hierarchy is the devil follower Qin Liang, the dragon of cold. He himself has single-handedly crossed the Devil's Land, where no man has ever set foot. He traveled from the eastern continent to the local continent of Aslan. Qin Liang had 2 direct disciples that honored to study the flow of the royal tiara, unlike hundreds of other disciples who studied martial arts superficially. The first disciple was Qin Liang's son named Qin Gang, and the second disciple was Ned Streeter. In order to learn the royal tiara technique through dueling, only 2 disciples are needed. There is no need for more, as it is a secret technique. Ned says he hasn't seen Jafir even among the regular apprentices, and that's not the only thing that's suspicious, because on top of everything else, he destroyed the precious property of the Devil Shoggoth cult. And Ned can't be sure for sure that Jafir is really a member of the cult. Jafir says with a snide smirk that the teacher didn't tell Ned that there aren't really 2 students, and if he'd racked his brain, he would have figured that out long ago. It takes 2 to learn a technique, but what happens if one of them dies? In that case, there would be no equal opponent to learn the technique through dueling, and the busy teacher wouldn't be able to guide the student all the time. And it would take too much time to cultivate a new sparring partner. And that's where Jafir, Shadow's apprentice that is bred to replace Ned, comes in. Shadow's apprentice is a backup apprentice who is raised in secrecy, even from those in the community. He is being trained in case something happens to the official heir. However, if the official apprentice never dies and steps into the shoes of the teacher, the shadow apprentice is destroyed. Jafir, of course, isn't cheating. He's fucking up. But not completely. Although he is not Shadow's apprentice, this apprentice does exist. But he can't report to the temple until the raid is over, because Altair and her comrades have bound his feet, and the hero takes full advantage of the situation. Ned remarks that if he is telling the truth, his existence is kept under the strictest secrecy. Why then the teacher sent him here? Also, Ned has already contacted him, and the teacher says he didn't send such a student here. This is of course a bluff, and Ned hasn't contacted the teacher. He just wants Jafir to start making ridiculous excuses and sprinkle himself in, thus giving himself away. There is no way Ned could have contacted the teacher from the temple, and in this situation, he has to make the decision himself without asking the teacher's permission. And if he doubts Jafir's words for a second, he will do his best to kill him. The hero says that he was originally ordered not to get close to anyone from the cult, and to join the raid himself, to replace Ned on the mission if something went wrong. Ned asks what he even knows about the mission, and Jafir says he's offended by such disregard for him. He knows he has to steal the dragon heart. Inside the dungeon is an artifact called the Dragon Stone. This stone will give its owner the power of the dragon, and once Ned's hand touches the stone, no trotter can catch up with him. However, Jafir can do all the same things Ned can do, and the teacher says he's not sure about Ned. By violating the order, Jafir gave himself away and contacted him, because the conditions for joining the raid group were too torturous, and Jafir doesn't like complexity, so he took the easy way out. And besides that, the hero wanted to tell him something personal. Jafir takes a step towards Ned and brings his distance sharply closer to him, telling him in his ear that it's information regarding the blood tears. The blood tears are a weapon stolen from Ned's family. For the sake of finding it and getting revenge on the temple, Ned follows the teacher, and he demands of Jafir that he tell him everything he knows about it. And Jafir in turn says he will tell everything once he realizes he can be trusted. So he offers to simplify each other's lives and asks them to throw him into the raid party as a brother. After this, Ned can't help but believe Jafir's words and tells him to follow him, and we are transported to an abandoned building near the temple, where Ned introduces the brothers to a new comrade he sent to help. The mysterious figure says he had hoped for a distinctive member, and his hopes have not failed him. This figure turns out to be Matthias, who is in the 36th position in the hierarchy of the Devil Cult, who says that he would be honored to work with a disciple of the East. The members of the raiding party with the status of slaves, who will follow the Inquisitor of Heresy in a group of 40 people, have become followers of the devil. Since there is a newcomer to the ranks of the traitors to humanity, Matthias explains the plan again, for mistakes will not be tolerated. Jafir thinks that he wanted to know in advance who would turn out to be traitors in the raiding party, but it turns out that all 40 people are cult followers who are different from the loser Sahak and Jafir in his past life, which put ambition first. They are an elite gathered to execute a strategy, and for the sake of the goal, they are willing to die. Why then, with such power, do they follow the devil? Ned worries that if Jafir has shown himself, then the teacher doesn't trust him. And besides, he knows about the king's tears. He wonders how close their relationship is since the teacher shares such secrets. He thinks, telling himself that he should not hesitate, for his teacher has made him a promise. If Ned becomes important to him, he will carry out his vengeance. For the sake of revenge, Ned needs the teacher's help, so it is not Shadow's apprentice, but he who must get the stone. And also being Shadow's apprentice, having grown up to replace Ned, he probably wants Ned screwed up in the dungeon, since only after his death will he gain official follower status. And while Jafir and Ned are deep in their musings, Matisse says to divide into teams and finishes explaining the plan, that his squad of defenders will guard Ned and ensure a safe path, and the strike team will take on the commander of the Elucius Knight. And Ned suggests that Jafir team up with him, because if Shadow's apprentice wants him dead, Ned had better keep him close to him to watch his every move. He extends his hand to the hero, saying he hopes they'll work together. Jafir thinks that in his past life, Ned, blinded by revenge, trusted the wrong person and ended up losing his life. By nature, Ned is loyal and patient, so Jafir shakes his hand, hoping to gain his trust and a powerful ally instead of a powerful enemy. In his past life, he tragically met his end, so it is Ned who will be the first to be saved. The hero recalls how he was attacked in a cave by a master who almost killed him with a regular stick. The master turned out to be Ned, who gave him a choice to either learn the strongest martial arts techniques and help him escape, or die and turn into a piece of meat. The next day, the list of raid members was announced. The members of the raid group would gather tomorrow at 6 a.m. and live in a separate place, practicing for the upcoming trek. Also for safety, the raid group members are forbidden to have contact with anyone other than their fellow hunter group members. Jafir thinks it's time for him to deal with something. Black steel spider dungeons, a nest of basilisks, and a village in a narrow gorge that Ned described as a goblin camp by falsifying documents. Jafir managed to collect achievements for his lads for going through 3 dungeons, as he had promised Goth, which makes the boys incredibly grateful to their Hionim. Jafiru says that they now have achievements and job openings thanks to the 40 slaves they sent on the raid, so a promotion is just around the corner. However, it's going to get a lot harder after the promotion, so the boys need to pull themselves together. And during his admonition, Jafir is interrupted by Dale, who can't muster up the courage to say that he wants to continue to follow Hionim and learn many more things from him. They may not have known each other for long, but in the time they've spent together, Dale has realized this man has a purpose, and that purpose is so grandiose that simpletons like Dale can't even imagine anything like it. Dale realizes that he's too weak to follow Jafir, and within 2, his mind tells him that if he plows on until he falls, the day will come when he can keep pace with him. That's when Dale might as well join in. Jafir leaves, saying he'll be looking forward to that moment, and the boys say thank you so much. Jafir sees how the 2 boys are now filled with energy and ambition, and in their previous lives, they were already dead by this point, and he realizes that his life-saving actions are not in vain. But be that as it may, they can still be considered dead, because if the cultists are able to perform the summoning ritual in 3 years, many people will die, including these guys. And in order to prevent that, Jafir must get the dragon heart. And we're transported to another location, where White Rose asks if the client likes the new gear she picked out for him. Jafir is a bit verbal, saying he's pleased. The Vile Princess's grave is a dungeon teeming with living skeletons. The undead don't feel pain, and their bone bodies aren't affected by slash-flesh attacks, and to inflict pain is to take stamina as a result of bleeding. but their skulls are great for crushing with blunt weapons. Jafir notices the excellent quality of items and takes everything that Rosa brought. Among all the variety of weapons, the hero took a closer look at the long sword of Zakat, a relic found by a knight 100 years ago. Anna thinks that although she found everything the client asked for, but a long sword against skeletons is not the best option, so she is perplexed as to what the client is up to. What she doesn't realize is that it's not the skeletons in the dungeon that Jafir has to parry, but the temple knights who are about to complete a 10-year assault on the dungeon, and the devil followers who are willing to die for the cult's existence. So he must eliminate them all and get the dragon heart. In other words, all members of the raid are his enemies. And so far, Net doesn't trust Jafir, even considering that he's told him many things that only a crony can know, and convincing him won't be easy. And if he screws up, there will be a fight that won't end like last time. It will last until one of them falls. In the meantime, a lab sorceress named Angelina knocks on Jafir and Rose's door. Jafir says he has heard of her merits, as she is one of the coolest spellcasters in the temple. Angelina starts enchanting items, and the whole room fills with divine light, after which Jafir gets a bunch of enchanted items. Even though he has prepared himself for a confrontation with the members of the raid group, he cannot afford to be negligent in preparing his equipment, because the fate of humanity depends on it. The preparations are finished, and White Rose pays Angelina with 3,000 gold pieces, and the enchanter leaves satisfied with her payment. Jafir remarks that 3,000 is too little for an illegal transaction, and it looks like White Rose went to a lot of trouble for this deal. The hero tells Rose that she almost didn't get a commission for her share, and she did it to grease a client, but she doesn't tell him that, of course. Jafir recognizes the nun's efforts and throws her a thank you, which makes White Rose embarrassed. And just look at this little cutie. How cute she is when she's not trying to chop off your fingers for non-payment of a debt. Jafir says how can he be? He doesn't have any money. Rose immediately changes her face, and the hero explains to her that they gave him a pittance for Basilisk, and the village with the goblins was a fake, so the dough couldn't be collected. So the hero is, as they say, taking no fucking dough. That's why he pays off Belial and Zagan's poisons. According to Rosa, this is the poison of the Persephone Guild, so when asked by Jafir if that will do for payment, she says it will fucking do. Jafir warns Rosa to sell it more carefully, but she can't hear him anymore out of joy, but does take her eyes off her charms to say goodbye to the customer and wish him luck. The next morning, 40 slaves from Reed's group and the rest of the party gathered for training. Along with the healers and temple knights, there are now about 100 people on the formation. Among this entire crowd, a minority survived last time, and it would surely be the same this time. Since everyone had gathered, the group leaders along with the commander of the temple knights, Lucius, decided to begin. The team composition was as follows: attack, recovery, buffs, magic aid, and so on. Everyone is commanded by 4 people. The leader of the healers, Arno, the leader of the rear squad, Rihanna, the leader of the vanguard, Matthias, and of course the son of God, Lucius, the leader of the raid group. A stigmata is left by a god on the body of a person he particularly cherishes. The chosen god is called the son or daughter of the god. While the son or daughter of the god is alive, they receive the highest powers from the god, and after death, they serve under the god as angels. Lucius received the stigmata at the age of 7. People treat God's children as angels and consider it a great honor to see them live. Jafir can't believe that such an important big shot came out to the common laborers. At the sight of Lucius, Ned can barely contain his rage, and Jafir is afraid that he might do something stupid. But the Son of God decides to make a prediction that this time they will finally put an end to the 10-year raid and deal with one of the 8 scourges of this world with their own hands. And also Lucius pushes a fiery speech that the names of the participants will be forever glorified in the temple, and the slaves will get their freedom. So they must endure 2 weeks of training and tread the path of honor, and the crowd of servants cheers at the words of their angel. After a time, we are transported to the special training site of Peak Creek. Jafir remarks that all this is not done for honor, and all participants will indeed receive glory, and the slaves will be set free. But it's not being done out of good intentions. It's just good business. Matthias gives everyone stones from the dungeon, so that the knights get used to the ominous aura that emanates from the vile princess's tomb, and their morale is not dampened upon entering the dungeon. The dungeon is in the middle of an internal monologue about how the preparations for the raid have been going on for several years, and a lot of resources and energy have been spent on it. So the temple has been collecting donations in high gear. And after the dungeon is cleared, roads and towns are built in its place. This is a large-scale business from which the temple makes huge profits, including overpriced safe land. The main third parish is Lucius's outpost for the assault on the vile princess's tomb, and those who are here are the true elite, selected by brutal training. As time goes on, the priestess sends training golems at the fighters. Most of the priests can barely handle them, and one of the golems tries to attack Jeffer, after which he immediately receives a deadly high kick, and Net warns the hero that you can't use the flow of the royal tiara here, and Jafir asks if he looks like a fool. Net and Jafir have already bonded well together, and they attack the huge stone golem in a coordinated fashion. Working as a team, they chop up the walking cobblestone golem in one blow, as if they've been fighting side by side since they were kids. They are destroyed by 500 golems, and that is the end of their mission for the day. Arna notes that they are keeping up with the pace perfectly, and compared to the last raid, these slaves are what they should be, especially Jafir and Net. Even aside from their awesome skills, they are working incredibly cohesively. Arna heals the wounds and relieves the fatigue of the slaves. He says that thanks to their healers, the Vanguard squad will be able to have 2 fruitful weeks of training that will equal 4. And we move into the night of the last day of training. No one is eliminated, and everyone is allowed to eat, drink, and rest. For tomorrow they will have a hell of a dungeon march. Net sits alone on the roof of Creek Peak, but he is saved from his loneliness by Jafir, who offers him something to eat, because all the days of training Net has had almost nothing to eat, and today they gave him a great chowder in honor of the last day. But Net says that he is already full, and he needs to watch his weight for maximum acceleration, so Jafir decides to refuse to eat too, because if something goes wrong, he will have to replace Net. He still thinks that Jafir is trying to take his place, and the hero for building bridges has brought a good thing, because if you warm up, you'll move 100 times better. And he pours a glass for Net, who asks him how much he knows about him. Net admits that at first he had suspicions that Jafir wanted to kill him, but in 2 weeks together, he realized that the hero has no such intentions, which is why he's even more oblivious to what's going on here. If Jafir not only knows all of Net's secrets, but also has the information he needs, then he should start blackmailing him. So Net asks what was the meaning of that phrase, "When I realize you can be trusted, then I'll tell you." And what does the hero want? Jafir says that's the wrong question, because he should be asking where and who holds the bloody tears. Jafir leans over to Netu to tell him where the sword is. The bloody tears are a relic sword of the Stryer family. Their ancestor obtained it after destroying a desert demon. The ancestor dedicated the sword to the god, who in turn granted him the status of baron and ordered him to care for blood tears from generation to generation. Father Inspire tells his son that he will soon inherit both this sword and the honorable mission given by the gods, so he must become an outstanding knight to suit the blood tears. And so that the father could pass on more than just the sword to his son, he decided to invest in one project. And after some time in the temple, Ned's father shouts to Alden that he has put up only the estate and the status of baron as collateral. Putting up the land, bloody tears were not part of the deal. Alden asks with a Gondan grin how dare he make such a commotion at the temple, and says that the bloody tears do not belong to his family, but to Baron Strayer, and the man who put up the Nacon status in lieu of debts now has no rights. This makes Ned's father very angry, and he bares his sword, attacking Alden and expressing his opinion of him, while his defenders chop off his hands and stab him through and through. Little Ned, in front of whom his father was mortally wounded, becomes hysterical. Alden tells him to be glad that his sword did not touch the temple servant, for if a commoner like him had killed a nobleman, they would have had to execute his son. And Alden calmly walks away with his guards, leaving the dying father alone with his son. Such a picture was a frequent sight. 12 years ago, investments in dungeon storming powers were common. The prices of the items soared, and dungeon-related financial goods flooded into the market in a wave. At one time, investors were able to make a lot of money from it, but Raid continued to fail. In order to pull off the investment fraud, a fake bum guild was created. And after that, many unfavorable factors erupted, making the financial bubble enveloping the dungeon burst, and everyone but the temple lost their money in an instant. The Temple of Light, who had made a fortune from selling items from the dungeons, even before the bubble burst, had deceived a bunch of investors by saying that the situation was safe and was selling goods no different from a piece of paper. It was all done for profit. Many investors who were duped by the temple went from being rich aristocrats to homeless, and after such a massive scam, the temple didn't pay in any way. All the while, Ned survived to crush the temple, and especially to get revenge on the priest Olden, who killed and cheated his father. Ned has scoured the world to find a relic of their family, so he doesn't understand why the bloody tears are in the master's possession. Jafir says that the master recently revealed to him the faces of the head of the devil's sect and the leadership of the 12 apostles. The head of the sect and half of the 12 apostles are high-ranking officials from the Temple of Light, particularly Aldine. Ned is incredibly infuriated by this, and we are transported to the next day, where Ned reflects on the words of Jeffer, who repeated the master's words. "If you become an important man to me, I will carry out your revenge." And the teacher, that is Gondam, plans to give his heart to the head of the sect, and if that happens, they will forever lose the ability to touch even a hair of the sect's hair. It's too late for revenge. They've been deceived from the beginning, and Ned can't help but believe Jafir, for he knows the words his master told him about revenge. Ned is distraught, wondering what to do now, but in the meantime, they approach the grave of the vile princess, and they burst in there with a foot, swinging open the giant gate. But once inside, not all the team members remain confident. The healer tells them that this is a dungeon they've been storming for over 10 years, and there are purification items everywhere, meaning the floor is cleared. This dungeon has 9 floors. Last time they were able to clear the dungeon to the 7th floor, but because of the sinister energy that rises from the lower floors, monsters keep appearing here, and the hideous skeletons appear in front of the sweep team, who prepared for battle by placing the vanguard squad in position number 3. Matthias is inflamed with words that he's starting a party. Meanwhile, at the Temple of Light, the head of the 3rd Ward, Bishop Alphonse, aka Lucius's uncle, thanks Alden for providing him with fighters for the time being, while the temple warriors went to the dungeon, and Alden tells them to use them for good. And we're back to the singing skeletons who have gotten into a fight with the sweep team. The cultist slaves complain that there are too many skeletons, not realizing what makes them appear in such numbers. And one of the slaves explains that the Princess of Terror was a great sorceress that appears once in 1,000 years and most likely bewitched her subjects. And besides, for 1,000 years, hundreds or even thousands of fighters must have come here, whom she killed and turned into undead. And the conversation is interrupted by a shaking rumble. It's the bone golems, created from the bones of several hundred human corpses, approaching. One of them swings its ugly arm and hits the ground with all its might, sending the vanguard flying in different directions, and the shockwave continues to blow away more and more people in its path. But the priestess conjures a chain of light and binds the bone golem. The experienced fighters, without wasting a second, launch an attack on the monster. But the golem gets more and more strength, as if accumulating magical energy, and breaks the chains. Mathis, noticing this, starts casting a spell, with which he casts a powerful attack that shatters the golem. The knights admire him, but Mathis tells the jerks not to relax. But if there are piles of bones, then there is someone who controls them. And it doesn't take long for him to show up. A skeleton mage that can control lower-level skeletons. The commander of the defensive squad tells Mathis to finish off the mage as soon as possible, and Mathis is surprised by his comrade's intelligence. Under the cover of the defensive squad, it becomes much easier, many discs of light crashing into the bone mass of the golem. Mathis begins to flicker his eyes around in search, but Lucius has already found what his friend is looking for, and tells everyone to step aside. He prepares a powerful attack that could kill anyone in its path. He unleashes a destructive beam of light that destroys all the skeletons and reaches the ancient tombstone that powers the skeleton mage. If you don't break the tombstone, the mage will get bored with his skeletons, though Lucius killed the mage and destroyed the tombstone at the same time, so it doesn't matter anymore. In the last raid, it took half an hour to destroy the slab, but this time with the Spear of Light, they managed it in a couple minutes. Ned is amazed at the power of the Son of God, and Jafir is amazed at the power of a 2 million gold weapon. And the haughty Lucius beautifies himself to his subordinates after a successful attack. And seeing this, The priests and knights exult in their victory. Tonight they will camp here and heal the wounded and clear the floor so that no new monsters will appear while they sleep. While the wounded waddle off to the healers, Jeffer goes somewhere, looking around the walls for something important, and he finds a brick that activates a mechanism, and we're transported to the temporary strategic headquarters. According to the intel, it takes the group about 6 days to get to the boss room. Now they will advance, destroying all the tombstones in their path. Rihanna objects that there are thousands of these slabs, and if they destroy all of them, it will take 2 days. But Lucius says that apparently she has forgotten how a year ago they took a shortcut and went through quickly, but ended up failing miserably. When they reached the tomb, they had to retreat from the main boss guards, and as they retreated, they were ambushed by a legion of skeletons, so they shouldn't step on the same rake. It may take them longer, but they owe it to themselves to destroy the slabs. Arna thinks that while they reach the boss room, they will still lose quite a few fighters, and the fewer they have, the harder it will be in the decisive battle. The main task is to conserve Lucius's energy to bring him as fresh as possible to the main monster. With the current commander, defeating this thing is possible. A year ago, they met a guardian who broke the entire morale of the squad with one look. The commanders hear someone screaming in pain, and Matthias goes out to check what's going on. What he sees shocks him. It's a Shoggoth trying to devour everyone it sees. Matthias doesn't understand why the 5 Shoggoths they had prepared for the sabotage have activated now. He wonders what kind of idiot did this. And at that moment, all eyes are on one man, the most suspicious man among the whole group, whose hand activates the mechanism, and a lever comes out of the wall, and Jafir asks what they are staring at, and with a sharp movement of his hand activates the mechanism. The entire dungeon began to shake, and the floor beneath their feet cracked and changed its structure. The dungeon began to reorganize itself. The day before the list of participants was announced, Matthias explained that the passage to the boss was protected by a powerful barrier, so unless they killed the guardian, the passage would not open. But after they go in, the gate will close and won't open until the main creature is killed. This is revealed from deciphering the magical runes of the dungeon. One of the slaves asks if the wall can't just be broken down, but Matthias says that if it could be done that way, this species wouldn't have lasted 10 years. The lower you go down, the stronger the defense magic is, so it's safe to assume that the wall of the main scum is indestructible altogether. However, Lucius isn't a moron either, so he thought of something. He borrowed a Colvera, a legendary item that is an indestructible holy relic from the Holy Pope. It will jam the doors, prevent it from slamming shut. Even if those doors were created by a great creator, no one will be able to destroy the sacred object. The strike force that is in charge of Lucius will create a distraction, while the others will take him as far away from the entrance as possible. After Netuk gives birth to the heart and escapes through the passage, the slaves should have awakened the Shoggoths. The Shoggoth is a living weapon that gains strength by eating people, and from one touch of it, one slowly falls into madness. People like Lucius and the other commanders have strong defense magic, so their minds will not be affected, but ordinary priests will not be able to resist 5 Shoggoths. Seeing the mad priests killing their allies, the commanders will lose concentration, and it will take them about 3 minutes to eliminate the madmen when they are hindered by the Shoggoths. Thus, the main monster will manage to kill Lucius, and the cultists will escape the temple with serious losses and report that the raid has failed again. Also, the leadership gave them elixirs that temporarily remove the effect of the slave seal. They must drink it before entering the boss tomb. Matthias gave Jafir a Karin of hypnosis, and the hero immediately adjusted this circumstance to his plan. We're transported to the time before the device activates. The hero activates Shoggoth, and since there's a large group of medics here, there shouldn't be any major problems. Lucius starts attacking the priests, and Jeffer prompts the team to get together to facilitate the medics who will be doing the cleansing. He runs to the device and notices the stares of the commanders. Matthias remembers Ned bringing their new brother, and his brain can't accept the fact that a man Ned trusted could betray them. The mechanism that Jafir activated changes the layout of the dungeon structure by rearranging the pilings and supporting structures. Lucius recalls that it was the one Matthias warned him about, and the one he wanted to use if the silver-haired slave turned out to be a cultist. It doesn't matter anymore, though. With the slave seal, he won't be able to leave, because Lucius tells him to stop. But Jafir doesn't care about the blonde man's orders, because before he started his plan, He drank an elixir that temporarily removes the slave seal that Matthias gave him. The betrayal of one of his cult brothers makes the heresy inquisitor incredibly angry, and he prepares a powerful attack. But his arm is spiked by Ned, who uses the flow acceleration of the royal tiara and his special elastic sword, not the dreaded blade that girdles the skin like a whip and rips it to shreds. Matthias is shocked at the double betrayal, and Ned leaps away. Though he has interrupted Matthias's attack, there is still one left. Lucius uses his holy spear in a rage and fires a powerful beam of light at Jaffir, who almost catches up with him. But at the very last moment, a slab falls behind the hero, covering him from Lucius's attack. The blonde doesn't realize what just happened, and Jaffir is girded with strange energy and smiles sneeringly, for he has used the divine luck skillet that empowers him. He can only use it 3 times. The day Jaffir went back in time and looked at the skills, seeing the blessing of Goddess Fortune, this plan immediately matured in his mind. The mechanism that activated the hero moves the entire dungeon, so for a short time in the place where there was no path appears road, and the protective spell tied to the guard becomes useless. And if he's lucky, he can manage to get into the boss room without having to deal with the guard, and Jaffir is damn lucky right now. He uses the flow acceleration of the royal tiara, and Jaffir catches up to the hero. After all, what Jaffir can do, Ned can do. Before the raid, Jaffir foresaw Ned's thoughts, who wanted to go against the cult's plan to steal the heart himself and escape. But the hero says that if he does that, he's probably finished, and to survive, the two of them need to take down the princess together. Ned is shocked at such pratfalls. He stands up and says he's not going to listen to this nonsense about how the two of them will have to take down one of the world's 8 scourges. But Jaffir tells Ned to sit back down. He'll tell him a thought. Jaffir is not shown to us, of course, to keep the intrigue going. Ned assesses the hero's strategy and says it can be pulled off. But there's a problem. There is the issue of trust. Ned asks what Jaffir meant when he said he'd be screwed if he escaped with his heart. After all, once he enters the acceleration stream, no one will be able to stop him. Also, what happens to him if he uses the dragon heart? Jaffir replies that first of all, there is only one way to take possession of the heart. If you do the wrong thing, you will simply die. Jaffir can't get hold of the power of the heart, but he knows someone who can help with that. Secondly, the person who will be in charge of transporting the heart is Cardinal Olden, who has come to the temple for this purpose. He's the same bastard who killed Ned's father, and if Ned doesn't show up at the rendezvous point with the heart, Alden's knights will begin pursuit. The Cardinal's paired knights are some of the finest fighters on the entire continent. On top of that, the entire cult will begin hunting Ned once they find out he stole the heart. The hero asks if Ned is sure of himself. Is he confident that he can get them all through without Jaffir's help? We are back in the dungeon, where the heroes are moving towards the boss at incredible speed. Ned remembers again how he asked Matthias if he could deliver the heart himself, but the Inquisitor refused, because he can't change his plan of action having already entered the dungeon. Ned says that they might arouse the suspicion of the Temple of Light by the fact that the carrier is conspicuous. To which Matthias replies to him that it seems his teacher told him that Aldine would be delivering the heart, but didn't tell him how. Ned says it's a safe way to deliver, so Ned better get on with his job. This conversation proved to Ned that Jaffir was telling the absolute truth, and his nemesis Olden was one of the cult's top leaders all along. He was on such close terms with the teacher that he was recommended for such an important mission. One had ruined his life and killed his father, and the other had been deceiving him since he was a child. Jaffir and Ned fly past the golem, and Ned blows it to pieces in a rage. In his rage, he wants to destroy not only the temple, but the devil cult as well. Jaffir brings him to his senses, telling him that if they slow down, the plan will go down the drain. He understands Ned's feeling, but now is not the time for heartfelt ramblings. There are 15 seconds left before the end of the divine luck, but they are almost reaching their goal. An ominous aura emanates from the crevice that leads to the final floor. Once inside, Jaffir and Ned find themselves behind a guard, who takes notice of the intruders and bares his blade, preparing to attack. Jaffir tells Ned to jump, and together they bounce back from the guard's powerful attack. In midair, they notice a gap in the air, leading already to the boss room. They make a lightning dash toward the closing passage and leap through at the last moment before it closes, in the tradition of Indiana Jones. Ned doesn't realize what's more in him, surprise, or laughter, and he can't believe they managed to get in here this way. However, for some reason no one is here, but the creature is somewhere. And before they can finish the sentence, the newfound companions hear a woman's voice saying that she can still feel the aura of the guardian, and wonders how they managed to get in here. Rihanna, the dead but beautiful princess, appears before the intruders and asks them to introduce themselves, and we are transported to the main mop-up team. The walls have stopped moving. Rihanna is busy organizing the treatment of the wounded. Arna asks a misunderstanding Lucius what they should do next, and he in turn ponders the fact that the silver-haired slave had not reacted at all to the godson's orders, which meant that either he wasn't wearing the terminal, or the cult had something that would remove that stigma, which in turn means there could be many more traitors. The Son of God doesn't understand how this happened, since he assembled the team from the people he trusted the most, and the slaves who are in direct command of them. He asks Arna what the names of the 2 runaway slaves are, and whose subordinates they are under. Arn answers that the silver-haired one's name is Jafir, and the one in red is called Ned. Jafir joined on Ned's recommendation, and Ned serves under Matt's, and Lucius begins to put 2 plus 2 together. While the Inquisitor of Heresy mistakenly believes that Ned and Jafir were scared and decided to run away, he thinks this was a great chance to gain acceptance in the cult and success in the temple. Now the traitors are causing his plan to come apart at the seams. Mats commands his brothers to get ready, and when asked what he wants to do, he says kill or be killed. And behind his back is already Lucius, who demands an explanation from his friend. Mats asks, do they need to find out anything? And we return to Jafir and Ned, who are standing in front of a beautiful dead woman. Ned can't believe that the princess who organized the most brutal bloodshed turned out to be such a pleasant and sweet girl. Now it is obvious to him that the chronicles lied. Such a beautiful girl could not have done something so terrible, and they dug up her grave in vain, disturbing her sleep. Ned is enchanted by her wistful gaze. He feels he is willing to do anything for her, and steps forward, though, to get closer to the princess. But he is caught by the scruff of his neck by Jafir, who says he is an idiot, and Ned notices the magic circle, which is a trap. The beautiful princess starts laughing madly and exudes a horrifying aura, her face transforming from a sweet girl into a disfigured face. With every second, she becomes uglier and grows in size, taking on her true appearance. She screams for them to die and attacks the intruders. Jafir doesn't miss the opportunity to troll Ned and asks him to look at his sweetheart, but Ned isn't amused for some reason. They dodge the princess's attacks, and she starts using multicolored hands made up of energy. The red hand absorbs physical body resources, and the blue hand absorbs magical energy. She can create several hundred of these hands at a time. According to the report of this raid, many team members failed these hands and became something like feeding vessels for the juridicals. In the end, Lucius, barely alive and preening, still defeated the princess, who replenished her strength at the expense of his fighters. Jeffer already feels the gaze of the Usara, who is just waiting for the princess to suck all the mana out of the hero. And we are transported back to the main team, where about 40 slaves led by Matthias are standing in front of Lucius and his knights, ready for a fight. The Son of God asks Matthias why he is trying to derail the mission, and when he allied himself with the other side. He realizes that Lucius is no fool, first a Shogat, then a slave who disobeyed orders. With those clues, he knew everything right away, and now he just wants to make sure of his hunches. Matthias realizes that there is no point in retreating, because it will not be possible to escape even with the help of slaves, as he does not know how the dungeon has changed. And if he comes back with nothing and fails such an important mission, the cult will simply finish him off. Any option other than killing Lucius and all the witnesses will lead to his death. Matthias decides to openly show that he is a traitor. He realizes that he is opposed by a Son of God with legendary-level weapons, as well as the head of the healers and a group of fighting priests. However, the Inquisitor has a trump card stashed away. Lucius considers only their side as enemies, not realizing that there are also cultists among the blonde man's men. Matthias signals in sign language to his companions that when he counts to 3, they should drink the elixirs that get rid of the lemma, and Matthias suggests to Lucius that they have a duel of honor. If the Son of God wins, the jurist will tell him everything, but in the meantime, he starts the countdown. He points 2 with his fingers and says that if he prevails, and without speaking, He tries to give the command to drink the potion, but Lucius interrupts him, ordering a squad of slaves to attack Matthias. And the cult brothers drop their elixirs before they can drink them, and against their will prepare to attack their commander. Their eyes read panic and a plea for forgiveness before their elder, whom they respect. But Matthias calls them worthless scum. And since the order is given by the Son of God, the slaves will obey only that order, and even Matthias cannot override it, for the Son of God is at the top of the hierarchy. Once his order is in effect, they will attack until they are killed. Lucius regrets that he has to attack his childhood friend, with whom they went through many battles. He cannot believe that such a comrade would stab him in the back, and the slaves begin to attack Matthias with a ferocity beyond their control. After a fierce battle, all the slaves were killed by the Inquisitor, and hideous twin-tails began to crawl out of their mouths. It is because of the fortification from these insects that the devil's followers are so strong. Because the brand of the devil is carved into the beetle's shell rather than the human body, cultists gain the abilities of both minions and priests. This is despite the fact that both minions and priests can only possess the divine branding. Lucius crushes the two-tails in a rage. He is disappointed with his friend. The Son of God trusted him to gather slaves for a mission, and they all turned out to be cultists. Arna notices that Matthias is incredibly strong, as he has dealt with more than 30 battle slaves in half a minute. The Son of God, however, is undoubtedly much stronger than he is. Matthias suspected that it would not be easy against such an opponent, but he had no idea that it would be this bad. He has never once managed to even just hit Lucius. He can't bring himself to recognize such a huge difference between the Son of God and the Fallen One. The Inquisitor begins to spurt blood and belches out a strange pyrrhus, which he clamps in his teeth. But Lucius doesn't notice this, and continues to question his former friend about why he betrayed him. Matthias sneeringly says that if he still hasn't figured it out, he can put his goddess in a crouch and demand answers from her. Lucius and Arna notice Matthias breaking the capsule with his teeth, but it's too late. Matthias's entire body begins to emit blood-red energy, and he breaks the magical chains. What he ate is the cult's secret weapon. It's called the Stone of Revelation. If chewed and swallowed, the stone combines with the insect and turns the person into a demon. It should only be used as a last resort, because the transformation process is irreversible. Matthias says that everything that belonged to Lucius should have belonged to him from the beginning, and if a man is destined to be ruled by a god, he cannot resist it. Matthias has nothing that makes him hold on to human life. Lucius orders everyone to attack, and Arna puts buffs on the priests, increasing their physical strength, stamina, and energy by 120%. A rain of magical projectiles rains down on the demon, but he reaches out his hand and holds back the powerful volley without even straining. But suddenly he notices Lucius leaping out at him to attack, and uses a strike with his legendary spear, the power of which should sizzle Matthias. The priests rejoice and praise their commander, but the joy does not last long, for they see the demon stop the attack of the son of a god with one hand. Everyone is shocked by what they see. Rihanna thinks they should help the commander, but what can they do if even the legendary weapons couldn't penetrate the demon? Their weapons are inferior. And halfway through the sentence, she remembers that Lucius gave her the Cole verses that he had placed in an item with subspace storage for safekeeping, with the words that along with the commander's attack and the stake of faith they would stand a chance. She reaches for the weapons. But just like you when you can't find your phone in your pocket, she catches a microstroke as the stake of faith disappears from her belt. It's pocketed by Ned, who at first couldn't believe that Jafir had thought of such a thing. And though it's a bit ungentlemanly to steal from a lady, this plan is very good, to say the least. We're transported to the boss room, where Jafir and Ned are dodging the princess's attacks. And Ned is counting down, and when the count reaches 1, the princess's magical arms dissipate. Ned was sure it would be just like Jafir said, and her ability would disappear if you avoided her for 15 seconds. Considering that magical skills engage the full capacity of the brain, using powerful spells several times in a row could simply melt the head. But even with excellent equipment, you can easily reach the lethal limit, so you should not forget about this rule. Meanwhile, the vile princess has prepared a new attack, but Jefffer knows the pattern of her attacks and dodges the first blow. Then together with Ned jumps on her tentacles, and using acceleration, they rush to the attack. A huge, hideous hand tries to attack Jeffer from his blind spot, but he pulls out the Sword of Sunset from subspace, which has the powerful striking power of darkness or light, depending on the wielder's mana type, and chops the princess's outgrowth into small pieces. And the hideous monster screams in pain, while Jafir and Ned prepare a powerful joint attack and begin slicing the princess with the sword-light technique of the royal tiara. Jafir lands, leaving behind a wounded opponent, and the princess begins to act strangely. Jafir and Ned think this is not the end, as she begins to transform. But this is the moment the hero has been waiting for. Jafir calls out to Ned, who immediately realizes what he has to do. He soars through the air, towering over the monster. Before the trek, Jeffer had explained to him that they wouldn't be able to kill the boss. As if they used up all the techniques on him, he would just go into Phase 2 and become stronger. But during the transformation, he won't attack or move, so he can be caught. Ned opens a jar of subspace, from which a stake of Vera flies out and pierces the monster. It reacts to the wicked creature's energy, and releases a huge amount of holy energy itself. The creature tries to pull the stake out of itself, but Jeffer cuts off its tentacles. The stake will do most of the damage, and they are required to swing their swords and keep the bitch from pulling the stake out of itself. The relic may have a legendary level, but the sacred power contained within it has its limit, and once exhausted, it will become a mere piece of iron. Lucius, who rented it for a huge pile of dough, probably didn't plan to use it as a weapon. But since Jafir didn't spend a penny on this stake, he doesn't care at all what becomes of such an expensive item. After a while, the stake starts to lose its power and completely stops emitting holy energy. And this means that the enemy has already been neutralized. The hero is dissatisfied with the fact that because of this stubborn thing, they could not even take a break. In addition, he spent all the enchanted weapons, although if you consider who they were fighting, he completely recouped his spending. Jafir drinks a mana potion and thinks about how Lucius is doing after Matthias's demon conversion, though with his support of the goddess of light, he probably won't die so easily. Matthias notices the survivor of the nefarious princess on the floor and wants to finish her off, but the hero stops him in time and says that in such a state this thing will not revive, and if they finish it off, the door will open, and the guard guarding the boss's room will come in. Jeffer says they need to find the dragon heart first by fast, and tosses Ned a healing potion, and tells him to drink it just in case. Ned in turn is surprised that the two of them have managed to overcome one of the 8 scourges of the world. He is not a weakling, but such a miracle is beyond him. But that's only thanks to Jafir and his strategy. It's beyond the boundaries of admiration and suspicion. It's as if he saw it all coming, and at that moment they are distracted by an unexpected noise. The gate leading to the boss's room is being tried by a guard who senses that his queen is in danger. With each blow, his sinister mana seeps more and more into the boss room. Streams of mana rush to what is left of the princess, and with tears in her remaining eye, she thanks her loyal knight Georgius. Thanks to his mana, she manifests the strength to complete the transformation. Net asks the hero what the fuck is going on, but Jeffer himself is clueless. In Lucius's report in his past life, there was no such thing. Apparently because they, unlike Lucius, didn't kill the Guardian, their future was changed. Meanwhile, the princess had entered Phase 2. Saint Cole, sensing the sinister mana, began to drain the sacred energy again. But the princess opened the secret passage with a flick of her finger and threw it down. Jafir and Net, without wasting a second, took advantage of her distraction and immediately attacked the creature. Net doesn't even realize what just happened, but Jafir has already guessed what the ability is. Ancient Medea magic, warping space. Net lands on the floor and activates a magic trap that almost kills him, but he manages to dodge. And taking advantage of his hesitation, the nefarious princess attacks him. Her attack flies so fast that even Net picks up on her speed. But Jafir saves his comrade by using the silver key and releasing the Spider Queen's web he had hooked onto the princess's back. At maximum aggression, Jeffer distracts the creature to himself. The princess looks back at the hero, who uses a basic energy management skill, boosts, and with his powerful arms, Jafir flips the creature away from Net. As a way of defense, space warping works great, but because of the distortion, the caster's attacks won't be able to get through either, which means the moment the princess attacks, she's vulnerable, and they have a chance to strike back. As the princess flies after Jeffer's web, she clings to the floor with her thorny tentacles And while she is distracted, she is attacked by Net, who delivers a devastating attack. He can already feel them gaining the upper hand in the battle, but his joy is in vain, and he is seriously wounded across his torso. Its Black Mirror ability, that reflects the damage received, can reflect it, magnifying it up to 3 times. She catches Net and begins to control her energy arms, which cause Net to take massive damage and scream in pain. But Jeffer's crushing fist is already flying to the rescue. It launches a quick series of blows at the princess's back and uses the drama. The creature tries to cast a spell, but the hero completes his technique and its sorcery is blocked. This is an Eastern technique for blocking energy pathways. By blocking the veins through which mana flows, you weaken your opponent. It cannot deal damage equal to a fist or sword attack, but it makes up for it by interrupting your opponent's spells. The power of her magic flow is incredible. Nothing else expected from a great mage. If Jafir didn't possess this technique, he wouldn't have a chance to block her magical veins. Jafir can't even believe that the daily battles with Altair have done him any good. The princess tries to increase the distance, but the hero snags her web and pulls her to him with a sharp jerk, hitting her chest with a powerful discharge of electricity that does her noticeable damage. Jafir pulls out an enchanted rosary from a silver key, each bead containing a Temple of Light spell. It is impossible to use the same bead twice. The hero throws 3 beads, which fly straight into the Underdark. Jafir thinks that now his comrade will definitely not die, but Entomb is interrupted by a powerful blow, which he did not expect. The dazed princess sends her assailant flying, and he crashes into the wall. Jafir resents the fact that she has broken free of her magical block in a second, and he is grabbed by the thorny tentacles. The creature prepares a powerful striking spell, while holding the hero so that he doesn't escape anywhere. Jafir has no choice but to simply take this blow with her face, and she blasts the hero with a barrage of magical fire. Somewhere in the Temple of Light, a mug that White Rose dropped shatters. She tries to pick up the shards, but cuts her delicate hand. She wonders if her client is okay, and if he is using the items she sold him. He's using the items, but he's not exactly in order. Luckily, Ned is still alive, but he's currently passed out. Jafir thinks about the fact that he missed the moment, and that's only to his adversary's advantage. One of the great unsolved problems of the world. Before the rebirth of the hero could finish this thing off in no time, but now he feels his helplessness to the bone. He has spent all the items, and his weapons are no longer fit for battle. What does he have left? Privileges from gods that look like candy, but in reality are crap. Iron Wall will kill Jafir as soon as he runs out of mana. Ustro definitely decided to cut the hero's balls off. Sacred animal egg. What kind of creature this is still unknown. Half of the sacred animals reject humans, so if he opens the egg incorrectly, he will dig his own grave. Divine luck has no penalty, but Jafir has already decided where he will apply his 2 remaining charges. If he doesn't use them at key moments, the plan will definitely come to fruition. Unfortunately, and despair after a bad decision is the best appetizer for the gods. The Sword of Light is a sacred object. Anyone who is not authorized to use this sword is burned upon raising it. It cannot be used unless you are a priest, for then the conditions of use become quite different. Rebirth resurrects 3 days after the moment of death. Once activated, the soul comes into the possession of the god of death. In other words, revival and the Sword of Light are just traps to take away his will and force him to follow orders that have nothing to do with Jafir's goals. He has something that is useless in battle, or something that simply cannot be used. There is nothing left that can make a difference. These gifts aren't really gifts. It's all for the amusement of the gods. The chains they put around the hero's neck amuse them. They enjoy watching Jafir wriggle around looking for a shred of hope. The princess is already preparing to kill the invader, and if Jafir is going to die here anyway, he does something risky. He draws a symbol that the gods will definitely not like, and a bright flash illuminates the room. Mercedes personally comes down to the hero and asks how to make sense of it. She demands an explanation as to how the man knows this blasphemous sign. Jafir is pleased that such a big fish has taken his bait. Proof of the gods' shameful loss in the distant past is all Jafir knows of this symbol. The gods once placed a ban on this symbol, so its depiction leads to punishment. The heavenly punishment is instant death to whoever violates the divine ban. As soon as the hero dons the mark, he is instantly killed. Jafir does not feel the magical trace of the juridical mark, which means that the angel has placed a barrier. He lifts him up on his arm and while he's plotting her teeth, he'll slowly regain his strength. Mercedes repeats himself again and asks how he knows the symbol in question. But Jafir asks a counter-question. Higher creatures cannot enter the world of lower beings. That is a mundane rule. How then did the angel get here? Mercedes replies that since she sent Jafir to this world, she is connected to him and can use this connection to appear to him. Angel allowed the hero to break the order of the answers, but it won't happen again. Already annoyed, Mercedes asks again how he knew about the symbol. Jafir interrupts her with the word money. Angel doesn't understand what he means, and Jafir says that if she's so interested in how he knew about it, she should splurge. Angel is perplexed by the pathetic man's insolence and shows him his power by pointing out his place. Now Jafir can't even lift a finger to finish the symbol. Mercedes tells the hero not to flatter himself. Even considering the gods like him, he's still not a saint or even an angel. For drawing that symbol, many gods are already discussing a way to kill him. Then Jafiris tells Angel to kill him, and she immediately shuts up. The hero points out to her that she won't deal with the crap that will follow after his death, and she probably doesn't even have the right to kill him. If you think hard about the flip side of the privileges given by the gods, it becomes clear that each of the gods wants something from the hero. Some want to watch Jafir fight merrily and die in battle. Some want to give him power and get him in their ranks. Those who want him in their ranks simply will not yield his soul to the god of death, and such a conflict is not favorable to the two sides. A beleaguered Mercedes asks what Jafir needs. The hero asks for something more to give him. He won't last long on his current privileges, and it would be more fun if he died right now. He shouts to the gods that if he dies, they will get nothing. And then what? It'll be just as much fun? No, if Jafir dies, no one else will trash the gods like he did. So Jafir tells all the gods to place their bets. He gives them a chance to get closer to getting themselves a cool human toy. Sveta answers his peculiar prayer by unleashing a divine stream of light on the hero, which brings something grandiose behind it. The protection that the angel had put up falls down, releasing a colossal amount of energy. Eurydice notices in the clouds of dust the silhouette of Jafir, who asks her if she's been waiting for him. And with a hideous grin, the monster aims all its most powerful attacks directly at the hero, who is standing motionless. She is ready to finish him off, but her hand is torn by a blob of holy energy. As she looks closer, she sees through her severed magical arms Jafir waving his new weapon. This weapon turns out to be the Sword of Light, which Jafir had received under special conditions. Laughing at the hero's audacity, the goddess grants him the sword, saying that she didn't know what it was really worth, so she's giving him one of her best weapons for nothing. Usrov intervenes and says that the goddess of light shouldn't give a sacred artifact to an ordinary mortal, but the goddess says he shouldn't care, since the sword isn't from his collection. And also one of the three supreme gods, Akira's, takes the side of the goddess of light, because it pisses him off that the god of death, who has never interfered in the world of humans, is suddenly interested in Jafir, so he will in no way give him the guy. The hero makes a sharp lunge towards the monster, and she applies space warp, but the sacred sword catches up with its target despite the protective spell and blows the princess's head off. Even though she is a great mage, she won't be able to defend herself against the sacred artifact of human magic. Jafir activates the active skills of the sword of Yehior, let the light shine through. A short time later, the sounds of battle had already died down, and the black, unholy substance surrounding the princess began to dissipate, revealing a beautiful girl, whom Jafir, like a true gentleman, placed on his lap, despite the fact that he had previously tortured her mercilessly. Jehior, in addition to attacking with a beam of holy energy, has the effect of cleansing from the highest level curse. But honestly, the hero didn't know if it would work or not. He sees the princess's real appearance for the first time. She says she thought she was having a nightmare, a long and horrible nightmare. The princess asks Jafir who he is and how he was able to deliver her from the curse, to which the savior replies that he is her follower, for she is one of the 12 heroes, Princess Eurydice. We now dive into her flashback where the knight gives her the heart of the dragon Kaisaros. The princess tells her loyal knight Georgius thank you, and asks him to address her by her first name. Georgius remembers that she wanted to say something to him after defeating Kaisaros, and Eurydice removes her helmet from the brave knight and gives him her kiss. Coming out of the flashback, Eurydice informs us that hidden on the top floor of the tomb is a magic circle containing the elven tree of life. This circle is needed to break the curse placed on the dragon's heart. Through the magic of the tree, she has kept herself alive for millennia, and though she was able to purify the dragon's heart, she lost her human form in return. Jeffer and his comrade helped her wake up from her nightmare, and she doesn't know how to thank them, though she's not even sure she'll have time to do anything for them. Her body has reached every conceivable limit, and soon she will pass away. Juridica asks the hero why he wants the dragon heart, but she learns that Jafir replies that it's too long a story, and they need to speed up. So he asks her to read the memory, and she uses the skill Contact. Juridica's exceptional ability with which she can read the memories of whoever she touches. She sees all the terrible hardships Jeffer has overcome, literally falling into the memories of a world from the hero's past life, a world where humanity lost the war against evil. And we are transported to Lucius and Matthias, who have come together in a battle to the death. Matthias, who has taken demonic form, taunts his former comrade, saying that Lucius is too serious. The Son of God realizes that even with Arn's support, such an opponent is beyond him. With each contact with Matthias's energy, all of Lucius's reinforcing spells fall away. Matthias enjoys his new power from the devil. As his power kills him, he launches a volley of fireballs at Lucius, which explode in a powerful explosion. The shrapnel from the explosion reaches the priests watching the fight. Arna ponders how he can help his commander. While in the background, one of the priests that is loyal to the cult gets the powers that all devil followers seek. He's thinking about how he can pick his moment to attack the temple attendants and take down a couple of the bastards. If he can kill the chief healer or the vanguard commander, maybe he, like Matthias, will get a revelation stone that will turn him into a demon. With the words that they will die for their religion, and it's nothing personal, the traitor pulls a knife out of his sleeve, but suddenly dark energy starts coming out of him. A magical seal appears on his stomach, and two tails burst out from the bellies of all the cultists. Arna, seeing this picture, realizing that there were a bunch of traitors among the priests. Demonic energy is sucked out of the insects and rushes towards the demon Matthias. It's an exceptional skill of demonic beings, a summoning that takes the insect energy from the devil followers nearby. He says he's using their meaningless lives for a greater purpose. Lucius, on the other hand, shouts for everyone to defend themselves against this spell, and Matthias unleashes a colossal blast, from which Lucius shields Arn and Rihanna. But the rest of the priests aren't so lucky, and almost all of them die. Countering the demon's onslaught with his legendary shield, the Son of God demands that these atrocities be stopped. But the demon is only angered by Lucius's hypocrisy. When at the age of 7 he got the stigmata, everyone was shocked, because he didn't even claim to be the Son of God himself. Teenagers train until the age of 15, and after that, they compete for the right to the stigmata. It is the oldest tradition. But despite it, Lucius already has the stigmata. But then what happens to Matthias? He had claimed to be the Son of God from the beginning, and everyone thought that he would be the next chosen one, and he would be the one to return his money to his family. Now that it became obvious that he would not get the status, everyone wanted their money back. According to ancient manuscripts, when a child of God himself falls to a man who was not on the candidate lists, an era of disaster and destruction begins, which means hot money is returned to the temple. Matthias tells Lucius that his father, after his son became a son of God, began deceiving people by selling them Lucius's blessing that would save them on Judgment Day. Naturally, this was a lie. With the help of this money, he successfully arranged his position, and a lot of people went bankrupt because of his father, and even more simply settled the score with their lives. Lucius's family are the ultimate con artists. No, more like murderers. If that's not villainy, then what is? The Temple of Light are even bigger bastards. First, they just turned a blind eye to his family's machinations, and then they joined forces. And having done so many horrible things, Lucius's father was not punished. The demon screams in rage that the real evil is the Temple of Light. And we drop out of the second line of narration and back to Jafir, who has finished showing his memories to Eurydica. She is quite upset about this future, and wonders why people lived like this. The hero, getting serious, tells her that the demon invasion that the princess wanted to stop is going to start in a couple years. But this time, Jafir is going to win, so he has one request. He thought of pulling it off differently, but since he has Juridica herself in front of him, circumstances change. She has experience, and she'll do a much better job. The great mage Juridica has already once paired a dragon heart with Georgius, the first dragon knight, so Jafir wants her to do the same with him, but the princess says she can't do it. Jafir, on the other hand, is not particularly pleased with her refusal. About 1,000 years ago, the world was on the verge of total destruction. Kaisaros, the strongest of the 7 dragons, had consumed most of the world. Kaisaros was once one of 12 heroes who fought against the demons, but a blood curse robbed him of his mind, drowning him in his own madness. Death began to choke the lands on both sides of the horizon. Of those who were equal in power to Kaisaros, the only ones left were Juridica, Georgius, and the Golden Dragon, who had taken the side of the humans. 11 heroes had to do battle with their former comrade to protect the world. And after a long confrontation between the heroes and the Black Dragon, a blow from Georgius closed Kaisaros' eyes forever. We fly out of the flashback, and Jafiris says that in the age of Jurigius and his era, all the trouble was because of demons that wanted to summon the devil. By inviolable rule, the gods cannot descend upon the lands of worlds except for those worlds that already belong to them. One of the gods broke this rule, the devil Tartaros. His ability to summon demons of all stripes allowed him to infiltrate the world of men, and those devil worshippers who helped Tartaros do it have now formed a devil cult and help summon the bastard. 1,000 years ago, Juridica's goal was the same as Jafira's now. She realized it when she saw the heroes' memories. Aristocrats, priests, so many powerful people didn't care about this world. They only cared about the fullness of their pockets. Greed pushed them to collude with the cult followers, and in the end, their indifference shook the resistance's position. The only warriors who tried to fight back were Jafir and his comrades. So the hero did not return to the past for a good life, but only to fight again and win. So he once again asks Princess Juridica, the strongest mage that led the squad of 12 heroes, convincing them to fight side by side against a common enemy, to give him the strength to defend their common home. Juridica listened to him carefully and sinks into her thoughts, in which she thinks that Jafiris and Georgius are so different, yet somehow so similar. She remembers talking to Georgius, who felt confident before the ritual, because Juridica and the Golden Dragon were able to break the curse on the dragon's heart in just a few years, and have performed the fusion ritual many times. Georgius says that their enemies are very powerful, and they now have the power to protect the light. And he doesn't just want to protect everyone. He dreams of giving his and Eurydice's daughter a world without war, so he asks them to believe in him. But during the ritual, something went wrong, and tainted energy began to fill the knight's entire body, lifting Georgius squirming in pain into the air. Juridica tried to do something, but her reaction was not enough, and the skin began to slough off her lover's face. It was the same energy Kaisaros had, a demonic curse. She thought she had taken it off, but someone walks into the room saying her face is exactly what he expected. It's the Golden Dragon who tricked her, and only created the illusion that they had broken the curse. It was fun to impersonate his comrades, but he was on a mission. The Juridic is enveloped by magical chains. It was the skill of the dragon tongue that had silenced her. Now she will forever shut her mouth and not tell the mundane secret they have learned. The dragon says that if they had not hunted for the dragon heart, they would have been able to live out their remaining days in peace. He gives her credit, for her skill is impressive. She performed the ritual perfectly and purified the heart. But now all she has to do is watch as her lover destroys all living things with boundless power. And completely consumed by the curse, the monster, who is no longer Georgius, swings his huge sword at her lover and then attacks her. The princess herself knocks the heart out of Georgius's chest, and an entire millennium has passed since then. Along with cleansing the curse, she has been waiting for a hero to whom she can transfer the power of the dragon. She realizes that Jafir is worthy of her heart, but his body is not ready, and after the ritual, he will either be torn to pieces or paralyzed forever. The hero realizes this. He has used all the methods to grow fast. There is no longer any way to reinforce himself with poison, and if he doesn't take a break for a few months, his energy flows may become tangled. However, there is still a chance of success. Juridica predicts that he wants to take advantage of divine good fortune. If there is even the slightest chance of success, with the support of the goddess Fortuna, that chance will become absolute. However, he miscalculates, and divine luck will be needed more than once. The hero does not understand what she means. and Juridica tries to say important information, but her throat is enveloped by a magical chain, which begins to choke her. Jafir doesn't even know how to help her. Even though 1,000 years have passed, she is still held by the dragon tongue cast by the golden dragon. But even though the spell prevents her from speaking, she can still pass on knowledge. The moment he needs luck, he will have to choose between his dearest person and someone else. This phrase seems to freeze the hero. Juridica tells Jafir to take all her artifacts and become stronger, and she'll lead him out of here, bypassing the priests. But if he needs a heart in his chest right now, he'll have to kill all 4 dragons within a year. She asks him if he can do it. Jafir retorts by asking if he is weak in her opinion, and 1 year to kill 4 scaled ones is more than enough. He promises to show her the world he and Georges wanted to raise their daughter in. 6 months is enough for him, so she can assign the mission to him. Juridica finally realizes that Jafir isn't just a hero, he's the one who will save the world. She feels bad for entrusting a mission she couldn't accomplish on her own to someone else. She opens the stash, from which a dragon heart flies out right into the hands of Juridica. Jafir finally sees what he came for, and Juridica sees the determination of a worthy hero. She begins the ritual, bringing the heart to Jafir's chest. Fortune's favorite activates the divine luck skillet, and the heart begins to sink into his chest. After a couple moments, the hero finds himself in pitch blackness. He is inside his mind. He has felt a similar feeling before. There is someone else here besides Jafir. A huge eye opens behind the hero. A sharp attack catches Jafir by surprise. A giant clawed paw wraps around his entire body. The dragon is extremely unhappy that his power has been taken by a pitiful human. Jafiris, on the other hand, is amazed that Kaisaris' mind, which remains in the dragon's heart, leaves such a powerful sense of presence. It feels as if the hero's soul is being forced out of his body. You can't even believe that these are the thoughts of a creature that died 1,000 years ago. The dragon notices that Jafir smells of the gods. Did those splinters send their puppet to him again? With words that he will not pass on his power to someone like Jafir, the dragon slams its huge maw shut, eating the hero. And we move on to Lucius and his squad. Matthias takes turns killing the rest of the team. In the end, not counting Lucius, only Arna and Rihanna remain, who have been grabbed by the demon by the throat. We are not shown their deaths, and now only the Son of God is left, who is hit by a volley of fireballs. Lucius, covered by his shield, says that the same attacks won't work on him, and launches a powerful attack at the demon. But Matthias gets behind Blondin's back, saying he's too slow, and launches an attack with his clawed paw right at Lucius's back. This does some tangible damage to him. He seems to be completely exhausted, his speed stiffened, and his reactions dulled. The Son of God thinks about Matthias's increasing use of demonic powers, and his regeneration abilities are unimaginable. They've both taken blows, but only Blondie is feeling the effects. And while Lucius was pondering, Matthias prescribed an uppercut to his jaw. Lucius recovered quickly and counterattacked the bastard, but the demon grabbed his weapon. The Son of God is trapped. Matthias prepares a powerful fire attack. An incredible blast strikes Blondin, but he withstands the attack, and then Matthias snatches up the legendary spear and sends his enemy flying. Slamming into the wall, Lucius has a second window for respite. He thinks that there is no Arn or Rihanna left, which means there is no way out. The only thing left to do is to use it. However, by using his trump card, he will put himself in mortal danger. Meanwhile, the demon is once again preparing a powerful fire spell. His paw is filled with a ball of fire, and just before the final attack, something flies through the ball and dispels it. What dispelled the attack turns out to be a feather with sacred energy. A bunch of these feathers float next to Lucius, and behind him stands the truest angel. It's Lucius from the future who has become an angel. He asks the past version of himself how much he's willing to sacrifice this time. The blonde decides to sacrifice 1 month of his life, but the angel says a month is not enough to win, so he'll take 6 months. A bright flash of holy energy overflows Lucius's body, giving him incredible power. Matthias doesn't understand why he was scared. He can't even believe what he's seeing, but he still doesn't have time to accept reality, and his chest pierces through. Lucius turns the demon's body into a sieve with the power he traded for 6 months of his life. A half-dead Matthias calls his former friend a scum for hiding such an ability for decades. This skill is called Honor Glimmer, The Son of God takes a portion of the power of the angel he will become in the future, and in return, gives up a portion of his life. This is only known to the Pope and Cardinal. It is because of this skill that God's children live about 30 years. They try to use it as little as possible to live a full life. But sooner or later, they still encounter an enemy, because of which they have to use this skill. And the Church now and then sends them on incredibly dangerous missions. The sanctuary of the Son of God is brutal. "You're just a buffoon dancing to the tune of the temple," Lucius asks Matthias. Did he really want this power so badly that he was willing to betray his friend? The dying Matthias replies that Blodin only says that because he was chosen to be God's son. The only difference between the two is that Lucius's life was recognized by the goddess, while Matthias's was not. The demon doesn't understand why exactly Lucius was worthy of this power, and how he was better than him. And with the words that the goddess is cruel, Matthias crumbles to dust. It carries over to the main characters again. Ned slowly begins to come to his senses. He wonders what has become of the main monster. He sees the juridical woman who is conjuring Jafir. The jumping between scenes keeps getting more and more intense. We jump again to Lucius, who prays to the goddess Arya to heal the squad leaders. And it works. Arna and Riona are breathing again. The Son of God reports from the Gorishu that they are the only ones left alive. Their raid is over, and now they are allowed to return. Once again, we jump to Jafir's side. The energy of the goddess Fortuna opens the dragon's jaws, and the hero is freed. The dragon senses the energy of the gods. The silhouette of the goddess appears in front of Jafir. This happens because of divine luck. It's as if Fortuna is personally trying to protect the hero, and he in turn already knows how to use his luck. This is not reality, but the labyrinth of his mind. If Jafir were to give in to fear, his mind would immediately be consumed by Kaisaras, and that cannot be allowed to happen. The hero rests against the dragon's paw. Remembering who he was before he was reborn, he slides the huge paw with incredible ease, and begins to put on the armor from his past life. Like a bullet from the dragon's paw, he teleported to the monster's eye, and in one clear blow, he punched through it. Then he jumped back, increasing the distance. Jeffer wondered if the dragon really thought he had him first. If he remembers correctly, and he does, Kaisaras will have him fifth. These dragons are so fond of complicating things. He's been dead for 1,000 years. He should have just let a human do the ritual. But he's got this whole worthy and unworthy thing going on. So now, with a slight wave of his hand, Jafir will knock his jaw off, and then he's going to re-educate him. It's time to teach the arrogant dragon a lesson. Kaisaras is excited by such an interesting opponent, and they engage in an incredible fight, which we are not shown. Instead, we look at poor Ned, who is glaring at Eurydice. He notices that Jafir is unconscious, and Eurydice is so busy doing something with the passed-out hero that she doesn't even pay attention to a waking Ned. He gets up and thinks this is a good chance to attack, but a sharp pain runs through his entire body, a mana freeze that comes when all the mana runs out, and it causes wild pain all over his body. It came at the worst possible time, but it's an opportunity not to be missed. Eurydice doesn't even turn to Ned and says he can't get up right now. He needs to rest. She sends out a stream of mana that envelops him. Suddenly, Ned starts to vomit. He vomits up a devil insect larva. Ned doesn't understand why this is happening. Eurydice, however, says that she got the evil lump out of him. And judging by the fact that the insect is in the larva stage, Ned barely used his power, which means he's been fighting with his own strength this whole time. That's really impressive. Even though it's only a larva, but its body has managed to get a little damage to its internal organs. Eurydice shared mana with it, so after a good sleep, it will recover. And Ned passes out without realizing why Eurydice herself is helping him. And we're transported back to Lucius and company. They are trying to figure out where they are after rearranging the dungeon. They're going to have to find their way out all over again, because the catacombs have changed completely. It's been a couple days since the last battle, and they're still no closer to the exit. Arno asks the Son of God what his orders are, and he replies that they need to find the Culverse. Arno argues that there are too few of them, and it's too dangerous. Maybe they should look for a way out after all. But Lucius refuses, because that's the only way they'll have a chance to get out. So they rush off in search of two slaves, who didn't fight Matthias, but attacked him. They're probably members of different cult units that are at odds with each other. They were counting on Matthias and Lucius to kill each other. At least it sounds logical. If the Son of God dies, all the money the temple has invested will go down the drain. With a whole decade of raids gone, the dungeon will definitely be sold. 2 slaves? No, the devil faction is thinking bigger than that. They've been interested in this tomb from the beginning to get the dragon heart. When the cult buys back this dungeon, these 2 will go back with the stake of faith and quietly sweep the dungeon with a more trained squad. If this is indeed the case, they should have an escape route. While Lucius was pondering, 2 chopping blows flew at him from the back, which he blocked with great difficulty while protecting Arn and Riona. The latter 2 don't realize how the slaves got through the guard without killing him, and the guard lets out an enraged scream as he delivers a powerful blow to the son of a god, knocking the legendary shield out of his hands. Arna worries about her commander, but he and Riona are thrown back by the shockwave. Lucius miraculously survives the impact. He can only use a glimmer of honor once a week, and he used it 3 days ago. He's completely out of trumps. Looks like he's gonna die here. He's very sad that he won't be able to see his wife and child. But at just the right moment, Daddy comes out of his room, and everyone is distracted by him. Jafir says that Lucius is just in time. He's been asked, so he'll help the god's son. Jafar coughs out his throat and orders the guards to fall nits. He uses the dragon tongue skill made available to him after implanting a dragon heart. The former dragon bearer falls winterized, restrained by magical chains. Lucius doesn't understand what just happened. Why is the monster obeying the slave? Jafir starts counting down, and the undead knight tries to free himself. And at the 10th second he breaks out of the shackles, attacking the hero. But Jafir easily dodges the attack. He just wanted to test the power of the dragon tongue. But considering that he hasn't mastered the power of the heart yet, the dragon tongue only lasts for 10 seconds. To be safe because of the difference in magic power between Jafir and heart, he will only use 1/100th of its power. Even though it's limited, it's still the power of a dragon. Jurgius grabs his sword and accumulates energy in it. This sword, called Gram, is especially powerful in battle. It is designed to kill the strongest dragons. The former and strongest dragon slayer Jurgius and the sword Gram is the worst alliance you can think of. He makes incredibly powerful slashing attacks and tries to kill the hero. But a wave of sacred energy and unprecedented power runs through his body. Jafir used the Sword of Light, which was given to him by the goddess Arya under special conditions, to fulfill her assignment. The first assignment is to save her son. Jafir prepares his strongest move against the cursed creatures. And with the words that the dragon slayer who has served good service can now go, Jafir shouts, "Let there be light," and completely vaporizes the cursed knight. Lucius recognizes this weapon that only chosen priests can raise, which means the silver-haired slave was not a cultist. Even if you are a priest, you can exercise all your powers as a member of a cult. However, Lucius can sense the energy of the goddess of light from Jafir, and not only that. He felt a similar sensation when he first met the golden dragon. It's a feeling of unbearable pressure. The hero hears behind him the sound of a falling body. It turns out to be Lucius, who has fallen to his knee, greeting Jafir by calling him a mullord. And we flash back to Gafir's fight with Kaisaros, which lasted 3 days. The muzzled dragon recognized the hero's strength, but did not agree to submit to him completely. He would watch Jafir with curiosity. Opening his eyes, our hero saw Ned lying unconscious, and Eurydica scattered to ashes. He thanked the princess, and said that she would not regret her choice. He also found 2 things among the princess's remains: a magical crystal grimoire, created by crystallizing basic mana flows, that allows you to master skills through meditation. It contains the ancient magical power of the Kingdom of Medea, which was wielded by Eurydica. Mastery of Medea's ancient magic of the 2nd level is required to learn the ability, as well as Eurydica's master key, a key that allows you to use all the functions of Eurydica's tomb. Right now, the power of the dragon heart is only 1/100th, but when it fills Jaffar's body evenly, the safe threshold of use can be increased. However, if the power of the heart increases and exceeds the threshold of 1/10th, 1/4th, or 1/3 of its maximum, a physical reconstruction of the body will be needed. Therefore, Jafir needs to find Altair first. She will be able to help the hero by using the magic crystal left by Eurydica. The gods know his whole life. Only a few of them are on the hero's side, but he can't trust anyone. What if these bastards get their act together and pull some kind of trick on Altair? Jafir wants to find her right now, but unfortunately, He still has unfinished business. Lucius distracts the hero from his musings and asks Jafir and Ned to show their shoulders, and then applies the breaking of the seal, clearing the heroes of their slave status. Jafir jerks Lucius around and asks him to deal with his debts some more, and the Son of God is very grateful for saving his life, so he agrees to give the hero a leg up. Lucius cannot believe that they were in the camp of the enemy for several years to destroy the plans of the cultists. He is delighted, and even ashamed to admit it, but his saviors are the most ardent opponents of the heresy. Even more, for the Son of God, eliminating the enemies of the goddess, namely the cultists, is the most important task, so he is ready to help in any way he can. Ned suspects that Blondin is simply trying to join forces with the new owner of Dragonheart, so that the rival faction of the Temple of Light won't oust him. St. Lucius is a weapon created by the temple at the expense of people like Ned. All one can feel for him is disgust. However, regardless of one's feelings, it can be taken advantage of. His power, status, money, and connections are priceless. To overcome the devil of worshippers, it is better to maintain a good relationship with him, as well as with Jafir. Lucius interrupts his musings again, and says that it's not exactly pleasant to talk in this environment, and wants to invite them to the temple. In reality, he just wants to see his family soon, but Jafir says that nothing is over yet, and the real carnage is just waiting for them. By now, the Temple of Light has already become a breeding ground for cultists. You can tell by the fighting groups that Cardinal Alden has brought to the temple, and the pair of knights who are among the 10 strongest men on the continent. This is the first time Lucius hears of Alden being a cultist, and Jafir says that although he has gotten hold of the dragon power, it has serious limitations, so he needs thorough training. Knowing Alden, they're not going to get away with just fighting. The hero pulls out the master key, beginning to rebuild the dungeon. The columns and walls begin to quickly change the layout of the tomb and reveal a secret room of juridicals. It's time to snag some really useful artifacts. The entire company stands before the giant gates of the treasury, which no one has entered in 1,000 years. Jafir pushes the gate open, and with a bit of effort, it opens completely. They see hundreds of artifacts imprisoned in magical crystals. It is clear at a glance that these artifacts are incredibly powerful. Jafir uses the key to the map and recovers the bling from the crystal. Lucius thinks to himself that they don't even know how to open these crystals, let alone do anything to defeat the boss. These artifacts clearly belong to Jafir. And who else is helping who here? Just how arrogant was he? The hero asks who owns the appraisal. Rihanna and Arna finally come in handy and say they possess this incredibly useful skill for going into a dangerous dungeon. The appraisal ability recognizes the characteristic of artifacts. The higher the level of the ability, the more information it provides. Rihanna thinks that the ancient state of Medea that existed 1,000 years ago possessed incredible magic. After all, these items surpass the current artifacts by dozens of times. And because no one sells Medea artifacts, they are priceless. Jafir turns his attention to a very useful artifact. It even makes him feel better. Everyone takes a bunch of useful artifacts. Ned got himself a raven robe, fog bracelets, and a mirage sword. And Jafir, of course, got himself the cream of the crop, a sword of Grams and a set of godkiller armor. Lucius goes back to talking about the battle with Soldan. Not that he doubts Jafir's word, but they have no way of recognizing a cultist in the temple. They are only detected when they use the cult's abilities, or during interrogation. But if the suspect denies everything, their hands will be tied. Ned says there is another way. If you kill a cultist, a devil insect will come out of his mouth. The Son of God says that whichever way they use, the problem is Alden's lineage and status. His family wields serious influence. After his father, he took charge of the 4th parish, and now that he has been appointed a cardinal, he has also taken over the duties in the central parish. Moreover, he has a good relationship with Lucius's family as well. Because of his neutrality, he has no enemies. Therefore, you can't arrest or kill such a person without proof. Ned says it is possible to kill him and then fake the evidence. Though the Son of God says otherwise, Ned thinks he just doesn't believe Jafir's words and asks for proof for himself. But the hero, with his trademark snide smile, says that the proof is just that, and he pulls out the very artifact that lifted his spirits, and we're transported to another place where some sort of rite of passage is being performed. Lucius's uncle tells Alden that he's feeling fine, but you can't tell by the look of him. Aldine says it would have been much better if Bishop Alphys had listened to him right away. Lucius's wife wonders why Alden is doing this, and Alden pays attention to her. He tells her about the insects in the bellies of the devil's followers. They allow you to use demonic power, and the more you use it, the faster the insect grows. And when the growth stops, it grants special abilities. Saying this, Alden sticks a few fingers in his mouth and pulls out a hideous maggot. His insect's ability is called hive. The bug has evolved into a uterus and produces larvae. If you feed such a larva to a man, he can be controlled. As a matter of fact, that's what he did to Bishop. Alden leans over the mother and child and asks if she understands why he is saying this. He is asking her to convince her husband Lucius of something. She asks what she needs to convince her husband of, and the baby starts to cry from the tension. Alden approaches the baby and asks his name. His name is Marius. The cardinal asks Marius with a disgusted smile if he likes bugs, and wants to feed him his grub, which almost crawls into the infant's mouth. But the mother grabs the bastard's hand and wrestles the creepy insect away from her child. As she takes a closer look at his arm, she notices that his body is made up of disgusting maggots. Aldine is incredibly furious about this, and God knows what he would have done to the family of the god's son, if he hadn't been interrupted at that moment by a priest who says they're in trouble. For there is Lucius standing outside. The bastard looks out the window with thoughts that the raid must still be in full swing. He sees Lucius along with Rihanna and Arno trashing almost all of his men. And a furious Lucius says they haven't seen each other in a while. Aldine tries to continue pretending to be a cardinal, yelling that Lucius is out of his mind and attacked the Temple of Light. Lucius remembers that the elixir that Jaffir gave him is the Eye of Truth, thanks to which Lucius can see all the cult members have insects in their stomachs. It's kind of like an X-ray potion. Lucius yells out to Aldine that he's arresting him on suspicion of being involved with the devil cult. Deceiving the Temple of Light is a grave sin, and the bastard will have to atone for it. Aldine, however, is furious that Lucius is an insolent son of a bitch. Judging by the look on his face, he has some kind of fallback plan. Lucius tries for pathos and says he's arresting Alden on suspicion of involvement in cult affairs. The larval man doesn't understand why the Son of God is already here. The leader predicted that Lucius would survive the raid, but he couldn't have cleared the dungeon so quickly, which means Matthias was defeated and exposed before the boss battle. And if the Son of God is throwing accusations around, that means Matthias gave Alden away before he died. But it doesn't make any difference. As soon as Lucius crosses the threshold of the temple, he's trapped. The uncle of the Son of God comes out to his nephew and says that you can't accuse such high-ranking people without consequences. But Lucius and company see the Aldine larva in Bishop Alphonse's body that Jaffirus told them about. Awashed all over, Alphonse begins to accuse his nephew of slander, but Lucius interrupts him, and throwing the letters on the floor, says there is proof. The larva man immediately realizes what that evidence is, apparently realized by the fluted seal on the curmudgeon sealing the letter. We harness the power of the flashback, and learn that Jaffir said not to reveal yet that they have an eye of truth that can illuminate the cultists. So they need other, equally strong evidence. Juridica's tomb is a huge underground labyrinth, whose branches reach all the way down to the bottom of the main temple of the third parish. Therefore, if one dug a trapdoor in the right place, one could end up anywhere in the third ward, even in the secret cultist hideout used for meetings. That's where they found this evidence. These are the letters that Aldine exchanged with Matthias. Everything is in there, both plans to steal the dragon heart and praises dedicated to the devil. After reading the letters, they were ordered to be burned, but Matthias must have kept them in case Alden betrayed him. That's how cult brothers trust each other. The cardinal starts laughing hysterically. He thinks that Matthias just felt indebted to the Son of God, so he leaked all the information to him. Soon the laughter changes to a completely different emotion, and he says that he is one of the cult's leadership, specifically 11th in the hierarchy of devil worshippers. But what does this confession do for Lucius? He can't lay a finger on Aldine anyway, because the bastard has taken the wife of the Son of God hostage. Lucius is very worried about his beloved, and she looks at him with tears in her eyes, hoping he will protect her. Alden holds a knife to her throat and says that Lucius won't have time to do anything to stop him. He pulls out his special princess larva, which is more brainwashed than the others. He now gives Lucius a choice of who to feed her to, his lover, his child, or he would rather eat her himself. The bastard begins the countdown, and Lucius cries out in desperation that he will eat the maggot himself, as long as he doesn't touch his wife and son. But Alden had no intention of keeping his word. With the disgusting smile of a real rat, he stuffs the maggot into the mouth of the wife of the Son of God. But suddenly from the back, he is impaled by Ned. The paired knight can't figure out how he got here. The whole floor was checked with magic. There couldn't be anyone here. And this is all thanks to the bracelets of fog, giving stealth. Wearing a pair of them, only spellcasters of legendary level will be able to detect the wearer. Ned makes an incision and slices the creep practically in half. The red-haired handsome man grabs Lucius's wife and tells her to hold on tight. But one of the paired knights has already sprung into action, and they begin exchanging lightning-fast blows. Ned gets hit by the Golden Knight for the first time. It is incredibly powerful, as the paired knights are among the 10 strongest warriors on the continent. But their bout is interrupted by an enraged Lucius, who takes advantage of the second window and attacks Alden. The Golden Knight noticed this, and covered his master from the attack with his legendary spear, albeit with difficulty, but he managed to save Alden's life. And Ned, with an aggressive beauty in his arms, attacks the second knight. And with the words that he has no time for him as well, he smashes his jaw with a clear uppercut. And the Silver Knight didn't even have time to realize anything. With a sharp jerk, Ned activates a stream of royal tiara and leaps away. Meanwhile, Alden's disgusting maggot body begins to regenerate. He thought that the apprentice of the man from the east had died at Lucius's hand, or had simply escaped. If Lucius discovered the cultists before entering the boss room, then it's an obvious convergence for Ned. However, why is he here? Did the man from the east deceive the cardinal? Pretending to help while he just wanted to depose him. With Aldine having lost his hostages, it's getting too dangerous. Suddenly Lucius decides to use a glimmer of honor, so he leaves everything to his loyal mutt, Golden Knight Caster, and he says with a smirk to leave it up to him. And he walks off pathetically towards Lucius, who glares at him, and then does an epic JoJo reference. Lucius chides the knight, saying that he thought he was going to be fighting two at once. After all, he's heard they're always together, like a couple in love. But a cocky caster says his one will be enough. He's 20th in the cult's hierarchy. Caster Hugo is going to teach the Son of God a lesson, and Lucius accepts the challenge of the arrogant upstart. Well, we are transported to the entrance of the temple, where Aldine's men won't let in and deceive the faithful by saying that the knights are now in training. And Lucius and Caster's fight is noticed even in the slave mine. A group of miners can't figure out what's going on there. White Rose has also noticed the commotion at the temple. She recalls that as soon as she said goodbye to Jeffer, the hero immediately warned her to stay away from the main building, because a big shot would come in and sweep everything there. She had a bad feeling about it, and tried to stay in the slave zone. But did the client really know everything in advance? And she wonders what's going on in there. And what's going on is that the snarling and acting like zombies priests under Alden's control have surrounded Arna and Rihanna. Arna uses a petrification shield, which strangely enough casts petrification. And Rihanna casts various debuffs using the Stone Soul artifact. And then she uses an obsidian bracelet, restraining a mob of zombies. Enemies who have been brainwashed by maggots are still priests of Lucius. If it turns out that the Son of God overkilled them, the opposing faction of the temple will eat Lucius to shit. And with the words that they can't be killed, Arna throws fainting orbs at the zombies. Rihanna wonders where he learned to throw orbs so aptly, and Arna replies that he was a gonbalist when he was at the academy. Their casual conversation is interrupted by a collapsed spire from the temple. This is quite strange, as the temple had a protection spell cast on it, but even the protection spell could not withstand the onslaught of the battle between the two heavyweights. Lucius and Caster stare at each other for a second between their mutual attacks. Caster is clearly already very tired. When a sword and a spear come together in battle, it is almost always the latter who has the advantage, because the radius of the spear allows him to strike before the swordsman gets close to the enemy. But Caster is an incredible swordsman. He more than outmaneuvered the advantage of the spear, releasing sword energy and increasing the distance of his attack, as well as dodging the spear in order to shorten the distance with Lucius and strike him. And he succeeded in making an incredibly powerful attack on the body of the god's son. But instead of winning, Caster was hit in the face with a bolt of energy. It's a mirrored ringlet that reflects 50% of the damage to the person who strikes it. Lucius deliberately let his opponent close to him to trap him. He asks Caster if he knows why his and his brother's names are on the list of the 10 strongest people on the continent. Without finishing his sentence, Lucius rushes out of his seat and begins to mercilessly deliver a series of powerful lunges with his spear, which Castor struggles to dodge. But still, he wrestles the lance back with his sword and swings it along the length of the lance, almost hitting Lucius's head. But the latter dodges and counterattacks the bastard in the side. Castor goes flying, but Lucius doesn't let him get away so easily. He flies up to him and finishes his sentence by saying that he and his brother only ranked in the top 10 because the son of a god, as a sacred being, can't be on the list of humans. And if it weren't for that fact, they would never have appeared in the 10. Lucius uses a sleuth, sealing the rogue into the ground and punching a huge hole in his body, then elegantly lands, and Arnos Rion and admiring their commander run towards him. But he screams at them not to come any closer, his armor gaping a huge dent in it from the impact. He was attacked the moment he used Sooth. Castor managed to land 7 blows. The Golden Knight, on the other hand, begins to heal himself, and the hole in his body fills with disgusting maggots. He had already realized that the reflection of the damage was not coming from the Godson's skill, but from the item worn on his torso. With the hole in his side almost completely gold, he says that he wanted to just delay Lucius, but has now changed his mind. The Son of God has really pissed him off. Castor snaps out of his seat with lightning speed and seems to teleport behind the blond man's back. His hands seem to be made of maggots. With those hideous outgrowths, he swings his sword and shouts that he will send Lucius to his goddess. But just before he attacks, he hears a call. It is a transmission of the Queen's words. The owner of the royal larva can transmit his voice and location to the princess larvae. While he is distracted, magical chains fly at him. Castor is imprisoned by the chains and paralyzed, and Lucius releases a huge amount of holy energy from his lancet. It should have been enough to incinerate the vile bastard, but somehow Castor is still alive and hears his master's voice. The mush-beaten Olden calls out to his 6, kneeling before Jafir, and the hero calls out to Olden for a couple of savory slaps across the face. A smug Lucius asks Castor what's wrong with his master. After all, they separated the trio on purpose so they could finish them off easier. And they end up right in the hero's trap. It pisses Custer off beyond belief. But instead of a fight, we're transported to a flashback where the mysterious hand of Dr. Evil from Inspector Gadget listens in on Alden's plan. Since his ability is mind control, he'll just take over the entire Third Ward. After all, the safest way to transport the Dragonheart is no transportation. He will wait for the head of the cult right in the temple along with the artifact. The head agreed to the idea, but why did it turn out this way? Alden had it all planned out. The chance that the raid would fail, and that the apprentice of the man from the east would find out they wanted to get rid of him. He set the traps with every factor in mind. They couldn't take action so quickly, but there was still one factor he hadn't considered. The betrayal of the man from the east, his words that he planned to get rid of his apprentice for his uselessness, turned out to be a lie. He just wanted to confuse and kill Alden. If that's true, then it all fits. But even though Alden is isolated because of his failure, it doesn't matter. He is brought to the carriage, where he is met by a white-clad coachman. And Aldine thinks about the fact that even though Lucius has learned the whole truth, it won't cause any problems. The cardinals of the Temple of Light, who are counting on Alden's vote in the election of the next pope, will protect him, even if he turns out to be the head of the devil cult himself. Alden's biggest concern is the strength of his opponent. There's no telling how many more disciples the man from the east has, and if he and his son Chingan are involved in all this, the bastard will be in for a rough ride. First, Olden needs to lay low and gather more fighting strength. He steps into the carriage, and his musings are cut short by the fact that his hand grazes a strange slime. He scrutinizes it closely, and every second he starts to get a bad case of the munchies. Then he starts rolling around on the floor, writhing in pain. This is Fade's special poison, #68 Belial. Its specialty is sharp pain, which Aldine has experienced firsthand. And we finally see our hero, who, with a smirk, begins to remove his disguise. He throws off his white robe, revealing himself to Alden lying on the ground in all his glory. The bastard asks Jafir who he is, but instead of answering, he gets a boot to the face. And the hero, right in front of the mutt Alden, asks him to be quiet. This does not please Silver Knight Pomux, one of the 10 strongest men on the continent, and he threatens to attack Jafir. But he is stabbed in the face with a needle and drops dead. The hero says he's too weak for Pomux, and Alden should have brought the real one with him instead of his copycat. Alden realizes this himself, so shouts to him telepathically to come soon. The cardinal tries to crawl away from the menacingly advancing Jeffer, and tries his best to talk his teeth in, offering to pay him twice as much as those who hired him. He also can't believe that this poison is so strong that even his regeneration can't get it completely out. He suggests that Jafir should think better of it. After all, he is a cardinal, and if the hero teams up with him, he will get much more benefits. But to himself, he thinks he'll just bide his time until Pollux shows up here. But Jafir asks the bastard if he's waiting for someone, like this scum whose bloody helmet he's holding in his hands. Alden is shocked to find that the real Pollux has already been taken down, and this happened 12 hours earlier. Jafir and company stood over the corpse of Pollux, who though he had fought to the last man, but still his strength was not enough to overpower so many strong opponents. Lucius did not believe that the Eye of Truth really shows the minions of the devil, but seeing the effect of the artifact in practice, all doubts dissipated. Ned recalls his teacher's plan, telling him to deliver the heart to the brothers waiting at the assembly point, but in fact, the so-called brothers were just going to fix Ned with slave cream and kill him, and the disguised Silver Knight was their backup. And Ned also believed these freaks. In a past life, Ned had miraculously managed to get away from the Silver Knight. After a long wander with a dragon heart he couldn't absorb, his older martial arts brother had stolen the heart and thrown an exhausted Ned into a cave where he met Japhyrus, and Lucius, taken under the maggot's control, was just a walking horror. But after his death, his wife, who saw what he had become, still mourned him. After the death of her child and loved one, she had no reason to live, so she asked to just kill her. The hero remembers all of Alden's atrocities, so he uses all of his power to kill him right here and now. Jeffer's blow unleashes a huge energy blast, and all that is left under the hero's sword is a small handful of ash, even too small. If he had burned to the ground, there would have been much more ash left, and in a moment of reflection, a blow from the back flies at Jafir, which he successfully deflects. But the blow is so strong that the hero pushes back a few meters, and in full alertness, Jafir sees a hideous creature in front of him. It is Alden, who has assumed his true form. He says that he didn't trust the knights to fight because he is weak. In truth, he is even stronger than they are. But he didn't fight himself, as he didn't want to show his true colors to anyone. But looking at him, that's not surprising. Jafir thinks that in this state, he must have already neutralized Belial's poison by now. It's already been 5 years since Alden accepted the Stone of Revelation and became a demon. During this time, he had acquired a disguise skill that allowed him to successfully pretend to be human. He had also gained a stable demonic power. Of those who have seen the bastard in this form, no one has ever survived. And he was greatly surprised that the hero had managed to get him to use metamorphosis. But it was a mistake. The demon strikes a crushing blow on the ground, from which huge cracks spread out in a radius of several kilometers. And the noise is heard by Ned, who has rescued Lucas's wife and child. He tells them to hide in the cave, and not to come out until he gives them a sign. He also gives her the bracelets that have the strongest stealth spell on them. His mother asks Ned how he will be without such a useful artifact, but the red-haired handsome man won't need it anymore. So he makes a lightning leap. As he rushes to Jafir's aid, he thinks of the day he's been waiting for. The day he would finally avenge his father's death on all the freaks involved. And one of them is already dead, which means there are 2 left. Ned is determined to send those bastards to hell, and we return to Lucius and company. Castor lands dozens of ranged blows on Lucius, using the release of energy through his sword. It's obvious that he's using the insect's power, as his attacks have intensified. However, the effect of them has dropped significantly, with fewer and fewer serious blows. Apparently he got nervous when he saw his opponent's excellent defense, so this is their chance. Lucius calls out to Arn, and he immediately realizes what he has to do. He uses his best spell, Battlefield Light, which buffs his allies' powers by 120%. Reinforcing magic envelops Lucius and Rihanna, and even the spirit gets effects. The animated artifact turns into a huge spiky lump and uses an enhanced light chain on Castor. The knight struggles to fend off this attack and leaps away from the magical barb, but it has already made itself felt behind his back. He fends it off again, yelling that such slow attacks would never work on him, and suddenly Castor begins to feel strange. It feels as if the world has gotten faster, but it's actually him who's gotten slower. It's the falling star skill, an enhanced stone spirit skill that slows down the enemy and lowers their stats. Lucius makes his final attack and stabs Castor in the side, dealing enormous holy damage so powerful that the impact causes a massive explosion, leaving Castor with only his legs. The Son of God wonders if they have finally succeeded in finishing off the knight. But the feeling of victory is not with them for long. The cracking of a building is heard, and behind Lucius, a piece of the Temple of Light begins to just fall away. The Son of God turns around to see Rihanna being saved from the rubble by a stone spirit. Because of the two heavyweights fighting on the temple building, even the protection spell didn't keep the temple walls safe, and with each new attack, the cracks kept getting bigger and bigger. The Golden Knight's attacks weren't aimed at Lucius. He was originally targeting the building. The temple begins to fall to pieces, and there are a bunch of brainwashed priests whose death should not be allowed. Also among them is Lucius's uncle. And while everyone is distracted, a red flash jumps off the battlefield. It was Castor, who had survived after all, and made a deceptive maneuver. A third of his larvae were burned away, but he was able to regenerate his body. However, it made him lose his fighting ability. He needs to ask Alden to restore the insects sooner rather than later. The knight can't believe that Lucius has caused him so much trouble. But still, basically their goal was to delay Castor, and from the healers as well as the damage-reflecting armor, it would take him longer to kill them all. So running away is the best option, as Alden's safety comes first. He recalls that when his sister appropriated the throne, and they had to serve a priest because of it, Alden didn't just take them in and restore their faith in themselves. He showed them that this world was wrong, and together they were to change it, to make it so that the world where false gods were worshipped would belong to the one true and faithful God. Remembering this, Castor races to Alden's rescue at an incredible speed. At a glance, you wouldn't know he had lost a lot of strength. All because Castor cares a lot about Alden, because this man gave him and his brother a reason to live. But an obstacle stands in his way, in the form of an energy sword that cuts through his helmet. And not just his helmet, no, with the help of Mirage's sword, which changes its size and shape depending on the owner, cuts the knight in two. The maximally serious Ned, who has met one of his sworn enemies, stands with his back to the chopped Castor. But even dismemberment doesn't kill the nasty bastard. He asks why he's always getting into their business. Ned says that after 12 years since they last met, he should still recognize his face. Has he forgotten how he killed Ned's father, Leonard Stryer? Custer, on the other hand, replies that he doesn't remember such a thing, that he's cut up so many people that it's impossible to remember them all. He takes off his shattered armor and hurries to please Ned, for he is now too lazy to fight. So if he runs away from here, the knight will pretend like it didn't happen. This surprise attack was quite powerful. Ned had accurately detected Castor's movement, and with the stealth skill he bypassed the knight's ability to detect mana flows, so don't underestimate him. However, if they decided to separate them and attack one at a time, then Ned is not confident in his abilities. Castor gets into a fighting stance, exuding a murderous aura, trying to scare his opponent. He says he's giving him 10 seconds, but Ned is completely calm. He reaches for something wrapped in a rag and rips the gray cloth off the object. Castor asks in a rage, where did he get this? The sword that Ned pulled out of the gray cloth is the Silver Knight's favorite weapon, the Moon Sword. He taunts Castor, saying that if he wins, Ned will so-and-so tell him what his brother's last words were. The Golden Knight in a rage yells for Ned to attack, and then he'll finish him off. Well, instead of a logical continuation of the battle, we are transported to Jafir and Aldine. The latter's attacks pierce through the trees, making the forest a sieve. The demon notes that the hero is quite good. The Temple Knights would have died long ago from such attacks. I can't believe he can still move so fast. The Alden demon uses mimicry to turn his hideous outgrowths into arms with the help of maggots in his body, and unleashes a series of powerful attacks on the hero that block his outgrowths with his sword, and then chops off the vile stumps altogether. Jeffer swings Graham for a powerful attack and tries to break through Alden's regeneration. But in addition to regeneration, the demon can use mimicry to create not only limbs, but also armor growths. It can also spew maggot digestive juices, which Jafir easily dodges and counterattacks the bastard in flight, cutting off his legs. Then he slices the scum to pieces with the sword technique of the Royal Tiara. Alden doesn't care about the slashing damage, but he spews a fog of maggot gastric juice and the severed limb. and the rest of the stumps turn into flesh axe-like creatures that surround Jeffer and simultaneously begin attacking the hero. The monster picks himself up, piece by piece, saying that he is called the immortal Olden. He has long ago surpassed human capabilities, and the human, which is Jeffer, has his own limits of stamina and mana, so the outcome of the battle was already a foregone conclusion. But he grabs the hero by the chest and says that Jafir has earned the demon's respect. He has appreciated the strength of a worthy warrior. After he has dealt with him, he will feed the hero a maggot and make him his slave. Finishing his tirade, Olden punches the hero in the stomach, causing him to fly deep into the forest, punching through the trees with him. The huge scowl flies up above the hero and hits him with a blow of such power that the ground splits apart. He creates a giant blade from his hand, infusing it with energy, and finishing the hero with a powerful attack. At least that's what he thinks. Alden recalls swearing allegiance to the head of the cult, seeking not only fame, wealth, and power, but also limitless strength. But the head said that an insect granting the kind of power Olden desires does not exist. It all depends on how he uses it. And from day one, the bastard used the insect's power so that it could grow. He killed people with the gift of power over and over again. And when the bug's growth was complete, he devoured the stone of revelation. He became a demon of his own free will. While he was thinking about all this, Jafir, holding his sword hand with 2 fingers, rhetorically asks, "Is this the 1% power? Or maybe the demon is just giving in to him. The demon doesn't understand why it's still alive after such an attack." But the hero simply ignores the monster and begins his monologue. He informs it that if he wanted to, he would have killed both Olden and the paired knights in one go. But he didn't do so for several reasons. First, he'd like to reward Ned, but that wouldn't make any sense if Jafir did everything for him. And secondly, demonic creatures were a rarity right now. After these words, a bright flash of ancient magical energy lit up the space, and Jeffer destroyed the demon blade in the wood, turning into a half-dragon. He just wanted to test his new power, and he could only do it here. The skill dragonization once a day temporarily increases the power of the dragon heart for 1 minute, increasing strength by 9%. The experience gained from fighting demons is very important to Jeffer, and the fact that Olden is immortal only plays into the hero's hands. The demon is in complete shock. He doesn't understand why the dragon's heart ended up with some passerby. He feels incredible pressure from Jafir, and the hero is about to try out his new power. But Alden decides to retreat immediately. He flies away, thinking about the fact that he doesn't want to die. He can't die like that, but in mid-thought, he just gets sliced apart. It's Jafir's kick that gets him even at this distance, and the bastard schmucks collapse to the ground. And Jafir says that the demon won't die that easily, because the hero has many more tricks in his arsenal that he wants to try out. And we're back to Ned, who's had his moonsword knocked out of his hands. Castor is trying to stab his brother's killer with unbelievable hatred. Ned is holding on with his last strength, and the swipe of the blade is only a couple of millimeters away from his throat. He remembers what Jafir told him about the weakness of paired knights, and everything will depend on how much damage Castor will inflict on Lucius and his henchmen. But Ned's role is just as important as theirs. Even from their childhood, the paired knights had a peculiarity. When they were near each other, they began to synchronize and resonate when they used magic. Archmage Henrik, the master of the magic tower, told the twins' father, Count Hugo, that their mana reserves were large and they were naturally good at sensing magic, and with proper training, they would become powerful warriors that complemented each other. However, if left to their own devices, they will live in a series. Thanks to Count Hugo's careful attention to training, the paired knights had great potential, which Alden noticed. He secretly invaded the legacy of the Count Hugo family's title and made the twins his puppets, then issued them swords that resonated with each other, enhancing their innate abilities, thanks to the swords, the sun, and the moon. After attacking the moment the opponent changes stance, there is a second window, which is every fighter's weakness. However, the Silver Knight's strike seems to cover up the Gold Knight's vulnerability. Eclipse is a technique that seems to create a storm of blades that sizzle the twin enemy. The strikes of these blades surpass the boundaries of speed and accuracy, and they play their blades freely in a duel, thanks to linked magic. There are no mistakes in the strikes of this paired technique. This technique is like the flowing clouds of the Royal Tiara's stream. It is a defensive technique by which Royal Tiara Stream disciples practice their martial art by reflecting yin and yang strikes. There is a big difference between yin and yang electricity streams and twin magic. However, the techniques are still similar, in the sense that the knight's swords also swap the attracting and repelling forces in places, successfully completing attack and defense. And Ned, who has comprehended the flowing cloud technique, quickly becomes familiar with the power of the paired swords. He calculates Castor's attacks and shortens the distance before cleaving his stomach. The knight immediately realizes what's wrong and jumps away from Ned, increasing the distance. Only Alden knew about the secret of this technique, which means that Castor's brother was tortured so badly that he gave them the secret. Upon realizing this, the knight went into such a mad rage that he didn't even hear Alden's voice pleading for help. In his rage, he promises to deal with Ned in 3, though no, not even 1 minute. He lunges, delivering hundreds of chopping blows in succession. As Ned expected, after showing off the Silver Knight's sword and twin techniques, Castor flew into such a rage that he couldn't ignore Ned. If the Golden Knight escaped to Aldine, he would make any sacrifice just to save his master. Having lost the Silver Knight, Alden would definitely be wary. No one knows who else the bastard might bring after his soldiers and master from the east. Ned makes a counterattack, but the knight's sword manages to slash the red-haired handsome man's face. However, Castor receives a similar wound, after which he gathers all the power in his hands and chops Ned in 2, but is surprised to discover that it was an illusion. Ravenclaw teleported Ned right behind Castor's back, creating an illusion in the spot where the mantle user was standing. Ned uses Thunderpalm, stabbing his opponent's back with a powerful lightning discharge and taking the chance to stab his blade directly into his enemy's back, but he manages to close with his sword. Ned can't move his sword, but Castor turns around and says he's caught. His arm flies like a bullet and pierces through Ned, causing him to spit out a clot of blood. In a moment, Castor is on top of Ned, trying to force his sword down his throat. But Ned clings desperately to life. Slashing his palms against the point of the sword, he holds back the knight's onslaught. He remembers his father, who loved his son immensely and had great hopes for him. The memory of his father gives Ned strength. He puts his fingers on the tip of the sword, storing energy in them, and in one clear stroke of energy, knocks the sword out of Castor's hands, then wraps his palm around the knight's eyes and burns them with lightning, savoring every second of this moment. He listens to the screams of a more blinded Castor. Due to the super-fast attack, he can't recover. All he sees is darkness and lightning bolts. The bastard tries to track Ned through the energy flows, but he uses Raven's cloak, creating a bunch of illusions of his own. Castor, on the other hand, is already just trying to strike blindly out of desperation, but Ned chops him to pieces, not giving him a chance to win. And then he annihilizes his nemesis with a lightning discharge, and all that remains of the Golden Knight is his sword and a handful of ashes. It's the long-awaited sweet revenge for his father. Jonah is busily commanding those who have already recovered from their wounds to help save those who need help more. Arna thinks about the fact that Alden's actions had cleared almost the entire building of people, and they had destroyed the crumbling building and minimized the damage with defensive magic. With these thoughts, Arna gets down to business and begins treating the priests who were previously under the control of Alden's larvae. Lucius, watching Arna, pondered that if people were starting to come out from under Alden's hypnosis, then he was either dead or disarmed. A familiar voice calls out to him. Lucius turns around, and with a smile on his face, thanks the goddess. After all, Jeffer, dragging Ned on top of him, had brought the wife and child of the Son of God safe and sound. Lucius immediately rushed to enclose his family in an embrace. The hero who had observed this felt a sense of satisfaction at the work they had done, for they had succeeded in upsetting Alden's plans and restoring the Third Ward. For weeks everyone forgot about rest, treating the wounded, arresting the devil's followers, and much more. There were truly many things to do, but first and foremost was to secure the support of the allies, and also on the arranged by Lucius feast were poisoned temple ministers, who turned out to be ministers of the cult that had been hiding in the temple for many years. After all this, we are transported to a cozy conversation. Bishop Alphonse can't believe that the mind of a priest like him was completely subjugated, and that the internal injuries from the maggot were so severe that he stayed in bed for days longer. Lucius asks his uncle if he is better now, and his uncle says he is fine now. Alphonse turns to Ned and Jafir, expressing his gratitude for their help. He doesn't even know how to thank them in proportion to the contribution of their help. And Jafir says they just did what they had to do. He also wants to give something to the bishop in honor of his recovery. He pulls out Mimer's birdcage from the silver key, and the creatures imprisoned inside this cage cannot use magic and remain in the state in which they were imprisoned there. Inside it is Alden's head. Alphonse immediately panics and screams to burn the abomination, but Jafir says he killed the royal larva and his ability is gone, so it's safe. He's now obedient, for he's been taught a very good lesson. And since he is part of the leadership of the devil cult, a lot of useful information can be gleaned from him. The bishop agrees to the gift, and Jafir whispers to Ned and asks him if they should give him the head, to which Ned replies that he has learned all he can from Alden and has caused him enough pain. With great relish, Ned says he's satisfied, but more importantly, he realizes he can't handle this case alone. Jafir hands Alphonse everything they've managed to glean from Aldine, the cult's hideout, and other members. Alphonse begins to look at the papers, and what he sees shocks him. The plan for the devil's coming, the destruction and reconstruction of the world, and the people who were pushing this, the Eastern Alliance. He realizes this is a bigger game than he thought. In the kingdom of Cain, which occupies half of the continent of Aslan, there are two forces, the Western Alliance and the Eastern Alliance. Originally, the two factions were equal until the Western Alliance had the Holy Sun. This factor upset the balance. Also due to other, smaller factors, the Eastern Alliance is in decline, plus some of their territories were sold to the West. The difference in their power became too great, so for several years now, there have been devil devotees among the aristocrats of the Eastern Alliance, and thanks to them, the two great insolubles of the world, Blue Dragon Artalis and Ice Dragon Myrenia, have been ravaging the Western territories. Lucius begins an internal monologue. This is the reason why they were in such a hurry to raid. The Blue Dragon's nest is in the continent's largest grain area, and the Ice Dragon has taken over the central port of the West. If they aren't dealt with, the South will soon be gone. Because of the situation, people who have lost their home and ruined aristocrats join the devil sect in desperation. You can't even believe it's all planned by the cult. The cultists are only pushing the world towards the abyss, and the dragon race is not on their side. So all of this will end after the blue and ice dragons are destroyed. So Jafir and Net cough up a couple issues with them. Alphonse marvels at the hero's recklessness, saying that killing a dragon is already unthinkable, and doing it with just the two of them is just suicide. And Lucius, sighing with a satisfied smile, remarks that it only means they don't need him. Jafir says that the Son of God is needed here to protect the Third Ward. He can't be allowed to take over the temple. Also, the hero can't let anything happen to Lucius's family. Lucius humbly agrees and appoints Jafir and Netta as senior holy knights on his behalf, as well as formally thanking them for their help in the defense of the parish hall. They will be awarded gold, magic, and gems. Senior Sacred Knight status grants many privileges, including visiting any locations under the control of the temple. They can also use items and magic in the temple. And also Lucius will issue them a certificate that they can gather people and lead them. They will also give them half of the offerings paid to the temple. Alphonse is clearly upset by this decision. Jafir and Net agree to the documentary status of Sacred Knight, but refuse the priest's clemma, saying they can't do it due to special circumstances. In reality, though, they just don't want to be under a controlling goddess. Jafir and Lucius squeeze each other's hands, and the Son of God says he will prepare everything for the upcoming hunt, and the whole company begins to slowly disperse to their respective places. Lucius asks how soon they plan to go camping, because they need to hold a reception before they leave. But Jafir refuses and says that there is something else. But without finishing the sentence, a hideous laughter erupts behind the heroes. The cage that held Alden's head flies into the air and begins to exude demonic energy. With disgusting sounds, Alden's head began to transform, and from the head began to come a voice that didn't belong to Alden. So these are the very heroes that removed Aldine. The Son of God asks the head who he is, and a tremendous amount of energy begins to erupt from the cage. This magic proves to be enough to destroy an ancient magical artifact with legendary enchantments, and the head soars above the heroes. Bow your heads before it bites you. I am the head of a devil cult. All the nihils tense up, and Lucius thinks his timing is very bad, as all the weapons are now being repaired. The head looks at Jafir and says, "So that's it. It turns out you're the one who owns the dragon heart." Jafir doesn't understand why this scum is already here. He knows that right now it makes no difference to the chapter whether or not it succeeded in getting the heart or not. After all, everything that happened was part of a bigger plan, and he continued to enjoy his double life. The heroes were only able to deal with Olden and his paired knights in peace, because they were allowed to do so. The head of the cult was to remain inactive for several more years. During that time, Jafir planned to deal with the cult leadership, order Lucius to start a war between the temple factions, and then rip the head bastard's balls off. So why had the head decided to act now? Did he really have a special relationship with Aldine? But then, he wouldn't have watched him being tortured and would have intervened sooner. While Jafir was thinking about this, Ned and Lucius, holding the swords of the moon and sun, stand right in front of their new Hyonim, ready to die for him. Ned tells Jafir to run away, and they will buy him time in the meantime. Lucius realizes that since the freak destroyed Juridicus's cage, then even the Son of God is no match for him. However, he has an ace up his sleeve. He can use a glimmer of honor. There's no way the head should be allowed to take the dragon heart. Jafir is discouraged that his comrades are defending him so rankly. Ned asks Lucius if he can fight with a sword too, and the Son of God tells Ned to keep up with him. With the words that the bonding spell breaks if the bonding mediator is destroyed, Lucius gathers energy in his legs, and the two flash forward. Ned and Lucius simultaneously attack the head from two sides at incredible speeds, but their attacks fall short, for the head defends himself with a spell and easily grabs both opponents with his magical paws. Ned cannot understand what the skill is. In terms of speed, it even overlapped the skill of the Ravenclaw, and Lucius cannot use any skill, because his magic is constantly dispersed. Retreat. There's no match for you with this one. Shadow of the Ancient Dragon skill. People captured in this spell lose most of their characteristics, and their magic is completely blocked. I don't sense any trace of it in that woman. I'd like to know if she made a difference with her intervention. Well, I guess I've wasted my time. There's nothing more for me to do here. The chapter casts a whole series of curses, sickness, decay, pain, and herpes on Lucius and Ned. The poor things are squirming in pain. They've never experienced such hellish agony before. And Alphonse tries to pray to the goddess to help them in some way, but suddenly a cry of, "Yerikon, let there be light," is heard. And Jafir, with the help of the Sword of Light, removes all curses from them. That's Sword of Light? Using the Sword of Light requires some hefty stats or direct permission from the goddess, which was a one-time thing for Jafir. But the newly minted Draconic Warrior, he didn't just buff his stats to the level of using the sword. With the help of the Draconization skill, a secret juridic medicine that multiplies stats by 2 seconds, and a skill gifted by the gods that increases the effect of all potions and medicines by 500%. He would only be able to use the Sword of Light for 10 seconds. The worst-case scenario might be that the head was sent here personally by Tartarus to deal with the hero before he becomes an imba. Jaffer realizes he doesn't stand a chance against the head of the cult right now. He could, of course, just smash Alden's head in and send the bastard away. But the damage would be too great, so it's better to avoid a direct confrontation. He calms down and pulls himself together. Jaffer remembers Tartarus getting angry that the hero was able to injure him and demanding to replay the whole thing. So the devil god clearly doesn't want to mess with the hero. He plans to fight Jaffer's completed form on fair terms, which means the head showed up here of his own free will. I thought I came here for nothing, and here's such an interesting shot. Who on earth are you? Why did the goddess of light choose you? Jafir says that since he's being asked by the cult head himself, he can't help but answer. But he takes out a coin and warns that he has no intention of answering for free. So he proposes a wager that will result in them asking each other a question each. And also, if Jafir wins, he will reveal the true face of the head of the devil cult to his comrades, and he can do the same in return. The chapter is in complete shock at the hero's words. Lucius and Net don't understand how Jafir knows the face of the cult head, since even Alden didn't know such information. My magical search skill can detect lies. He does know the true face. Jafir tells the head to do without foolishness. If he starts a massacre, the hero's comrades will surely be finished. But Jaffer will escape, and he has plenty of time to ruin the chapter's life. Otherwise, he does not need to reveal the secret of the chapter now. So the cult leader agrees, and Jafir flips a coin. It was as if time slowed down from the tension of everyone present, and Lucius and Netta's eyes locked onto the coin. As soon as the coin landed, Jafir covered it with his hand. The head placed it on Tails, and the hero placed it on Eagle.